Welcome, weary travellers of the night. Before we begin our journey into the shadows of memory and forgotten sins, tell me, how was your day? What time is it where you are in this vast, sleeping world? Whether you're listening from the quiet suburbs of Ohio, the bustling streets of Tokyo, or somewhere in between, you found your way to Sleep Theories. If these whispered tales help guide you into the realm of dreams, please consider subscribing. We have many more secrets to uncover together. Now, settle in. Close your eyes. Let me tell you about a man named Caleb Monroe and the terrible truth he discovered about himself in the dying light of the 20th century. The first time I blacked out, I was standing in the produce aisle with blood on my collar. I remember reaching for apples, the red ones, Gala, I think, when the world tilted sideways like someone had pulled the plug on reality. One moment I was comparing fruit. The next I was staring at my reflection in the polished surface of a refrigerated case, watching crimson droplets fall from my shirt onto the linoleum below. The blood wasn't mine. I checked my hands, my arms, ran my tongue along my lips, tasting for copper. Nothing. But there it was, dark and fresh against the white cotton of my polo shirt. 3 drops that hadn't been there when I'd walked into Harris Teeter 20 minutes earlier. The produce manager, a kid maybe 19 with acne scars and worried eyes, was asking if I was okay. I nodded, mumbled something about a nosebleed, and left without buying anything. The automatic doors whispered shut behind me, and I stood in the parking lot trying to remember what had happened in those missing minutes. I couldn't. That was October 15th. 1998, a Thursday. I remember because I'd taken the afternoon off from my job at the insurance company to run errands before Sarah got home. Normal, suburban, forgettable Thursday afternoon things. Groceries, dry cleaning, oil change. The second time it happened, I heard a voice say, "The moon is full in Shanghai." I was in my kitchen making coffee before the morning commute. Sarah had already left for her teaching job, and the house held that particular silence of empty rooms and settling wood. The coffee maker was gurgling, steam rising from the carafe when I heard it. Not from the radio, not from outside, but from somewhere much closer, as if someone had whispered directly into my ear. "The moon is full in Shanghai." 5 words that meant nothing to me, spoken in a voice I didn't recognise but somehow knew. A woman's voice, soft and precise, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. The moment I heard it, my body went rigid, my muscles locked. The coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered against the kitchen tiles. Then, darkness. When I woke up, I was sitting in my car in a Denny's parking lot outside Richmond, Virginia. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. I'd lost 16 hours. The drive home took 2 hours. I called in sick the next day and told Sarah I'd had food poisoning. She believed me because I looked like hell. Pale, shaking, with dark circles under my eyes like I'd been awake for days. Which, for all I knew, maybe I had been. That's when I started keeping a journal. Not the kind of journal a normal person keeps, full of thoughts and feelings and daily observations. Mine was different, clinical, desperate. I documented every gap in my memory, every moment that felt wrong, every phrase or sound that made my vision blur at the edges. October 21st. Lost 3 hours. Found myself in basement with dirt under fingernails. Can't remember going downstairs. October 29th. Heard phrase again, something about sparrows flying backward. Woke up with torn knuckles and grass stains on jeans. November 3rd. Sarah mentioned I was talking in my sleep. Said I kept repeating numbers. She thought it was my social security number, but the sequence was wrong. The journal became my lifeline, the only proof that these gaps were real and not just stress-induced episodes like Sarah kept suggesting. She wanted me to see Dr. Morrison, our family physician, maybe get some anxiety medication. But I knew this wasn't anxiety. This was something else entirely. The breakthrough came in November, 3 weeks after the Richmond incident. I was cleaning out the medicine cabinet when I found a prescription bottle I didn't remember getting. Hydroxyzine 25mg tablets. The label was partially torn, but I could make out my name and a date from 6 months earlier. The prescribing physician was someone I'd never heard of. Dr. Eleanor Vasquez at Riverside Medical Center. I called Riverside. They had no record of a doctor. Vasquez. They'd never had a doctor. Vasquez. The prescription number didn't exist in their system either. But the pills were real. The bottle was real. And when I looked at those small white tablets, something deep in my brain began to itch. The Richmond Public Library's microfilm room smelled like dust and old paper, with that particular mustiness that comes from decades of stored knowledge slowly decomposing. I'd been coming here for 2 weeks, during lunch breaks and after work, slowly working my way through archives I couldn't quite explain my interest in. Medical journals, military records, congressional hearings from the 1970s. I was looking for something, but I didn't know what. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, had grown used to my regular appearances. She'd helped me load the microfilm reels without question, though I caught her watching me sometimes with curious eyes. I must have looked like a man possessed, hunched over the viewing machine for hours, scrolling through page after page of documents that seemed to have no connection to my ordinary life as an insurance adjuster. But I knew they were connected. I could feel it. The first real clue came on a Tuesday evening in early December. I was reviewing declassified CIA documents from the 1970s, files released under the Freedom of Information Act that detailed various Cold War-era programs. Most of it was heavily redacted, black bars covering names and details, but patterns began to emerge. MKULTRA, Project ARTICHOKE, BLUEBIRD. Names that meant nothing to most people, but as I read, a chill settled into my bones. Mind control experiments, psychological conditioning, LSD administered without consent, electroshock therapy used not to heal, but to break down and rebuild human consciousness. Then I found it. A single line in a budget document from 1976, mostly obscured but still partially legible. Project Hermes, subject acquisition and conditioning, $2.3 million allocated for continuation of pediatric protocols. Hermes. The moment I read that word, my vision tunneled. The microfilm room faded away, and for just a second I was somewhere else entirely, a white room with no windows, the smell of antiseptic, and a woman's voice saying my name. Not Caleb, a different name, a number. When my vision cleared, Mrs. Chen was standing beside my chair looking concerned. "You okay, honey?" You went white as a sheet. I nodded, saved the document reference and left immediately. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I saw that white room, felt the cold touch of metal against my temples, heard voices discussing me like I was a specimen in a jar. The next morning I called in sick again and drove to the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. If Hermes was real, if it was connected to me somehow, there would be more records. There had to be. The archives were a labyrinth of bureaucracy and security clearances, but I was determined. I filled out forms, waited in lines, spoke to clerks who looked at me like I was just another conspiracy theorist chasing shadows. But patience is something you learn in the insurance business, and I had plenty of time. It took 3 days to get access to the right collection, and another 2 days to find what I was looking for. The Hermes files were thin, maybe 50 pages total, and heavily redacted. But what remained was enough to make my hands shake as I turned each page. Subject acquisition protocols, age ranges 6 to 12 years optimal, trauma-based conditioning, memory suppression techniques, long-term activation procedures, and photographs. 23 black and white photographs of children in hospital beds, electrodes attached to their heads, IV lines running into small arms. Most of the faces were obscured or redacted, but one wasn't. A boy, maybe 8 years old with dark hair and serious eyes. lying in a hospital bed staring directly at the camera with an expression far too old for his face. I was looking at myself. The file number was visible at the bottom of the photograph, M17-410. Status: dormant. The memories came back in pieces, like a jigsaw puzzle assembled by someone with shaking hands. I would be driving to work, stopped at a red light, when suddenly I'd smell antiseptic and hear the low hum of electrical equipment. Or I'd be watching television, and the sound of the channel changing would trigger a flash of white coats and clipboards. The clearest memory surfaced on a Saturday morning while I was shaving. I was running the razor along my jaw when I caught sight of my eyes in the mirror, not looking at them, but really seeing them for the first time in months. There was something wrong with my reflection, something I couldn't quite name. Then it hit me. Those weren't my eyes looking back. They were the eyes of that 8-year-old boy in the photograph, aged 30 years but somehow unchanged. The same careful blankness, the same guarded distance. The razor fell from my hand and clattered into the sink. I was in the white room. It was always the white room. The woman with red lipstick was there, sitting in a chair beside my bed. She had kind eyes and gentle hands, but when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made my small body go completely still. "Tell me about the sparrow, Caleb." I knew the answer. I'd been taught the answer through repetition and reward, through pain and sweet relief. The sparrow flies backward when it rains. "Good boy." She made a note on her clipboard. "And what happens when the sparrow flies backward?" I listened for instructions. "That's right. And do you remember listening for instructions?" "No, Mum." "Perfect." The memory dissolved, but others followed. A kaleidoscope of white rooms and medical equipment, of tests and procedures and gentle voices asking me to do terrible things. There was a rabbit in a cage, white and soft with pink eyes that tracked my movement as I approached. The woman with the clipboard stood behind me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "The rabbit is sick, Caleb. It's suffering. Can you help it stop suffering?" I knew what she meant. I'd been taught what she meant. My small hands reached for the rabbit's neck. "I can't watch," I whispered. "Close your eyes then, but don't let go." The memory ended there, but I knew what had happened next. I could feel it in the guilty tension of my adult hands, the way my fingers remembered the give of small bones. Later there were other tests. Not rabbits. A man was brought into the white room bound to a chair, his eyes wide with fear above the tape covering his mouth. He was maybe 30, with the soft look of someone who'd never expected to end up in a place like this. "He's a bad man, Caleb," the woman said. "He hurt children like you. Don't you want him to stop hurting children?" I was 12 by then, old enough to understand, but young enough that understanding felt like drowning. The tools were on the table beside me, cold metal implements I'd been trained to use. "I don't want to," I said. The woman's voice never changed, never lost its patient kindness. "The sparrow flies backward when it rains." My body went rigid, my will dissolved. When I came back to myself, hours later, the man was gone and my hands were clean. I remembered nothing except the woman asking if I was hungry, and how grateful I felt when she brought me a sandwich. I stood in my bathroom for 20 minutes after that memory surfaced, gripping the edges of the sink and trying not to vomit. The face in the mirror was still mine, still 43 years old with greying temples and laugh lines around the eyes. But now I could see what was underneath. A weapon, a tool, a thing that had been built to kill and then forget. I found Lena through a veteran support forum online, though neither of us had served in any war that appeared in history books. Her post was buried deep in a thread about recovered memories and government experiments. Most of the responses were the usual conspiracy theory noise, ramblings about mind control rays and alien abductions that made serious researchers look crazy by association. But Lena's message was different, clinical, specific. Looking for others who were part of Project Hermes, 1970s to 80s, I have documentation, missing time episodes, physical evidence, need to compare notes. I'd been staring at her post for 3 days before I finally sent a private message. What do you say to someone who might be the only other person in the world who understands what you're going through? I think I was part of it too. Can we talk? Her response came within an hour. Burke Lake Park, Virginia. Wednesday, 2 p.m. I'll be feeding ducks near the boat launch. Come alone. Burke Lake was 40 minutes from my house, a quiet suburban park where families brought their children on weekends. It seemed like an odd place for a clandestine meeting, but maybe that was the point. Who would suspect two middle-aged people having a conversation near a duck pond? I recognised her immediately, though I couldn't say why. She was maybe 5 years younger than me, with short grey hair and the kind of careful posture that suggested someone always ready to move quickly. She was scattering breadcrumbs for a group of mallards when I approached. Caleb? I nodded. Lena? She studied my face for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling she was looking for something specific. Finally, she seemed satisfied. Let me see your hands. An odd request, but I held them out palm up. She examined them carefully, running one finger along the edge of my left palm. You have the scar, she said. Same place as mine. She showed me her own hand. There, along the edge of her left palm, was a thin white line maybe an inch long. Looking at it, I could suddenly feel my own scar, a mark I'd carried for so long I'd stopped noticing it, explaining it away as a childhood accident I couldn't quite remember. Tracking chip, Lena said matter-of-factly. Passive RFID, probably. They could monitor our locations without us knowing. We walked around the lake while she told me her story. Like me, she'd started having episodes in her 40s. Lost time. Strange dreams. Violent impulses she couldn't explain. Unlike me, she'd had help. A therapist who specialised in trauma recovery and didn't dismiss her memories as fantasy. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that the programming doesn't just go away, she said. It's designed to remain dormant until activated. We were sleeper agents, Caleb. Built-in assets for someone. The CIA? She shook her head. That's what I thought at first. But the more I've researched, the more I think Hermes was something else. A private program, maybe. Or rogue elements within intelligence agencies. People with their own agenda. We found a bench overlooking the water and sat in silence for a few minutes. The normalcy of the setting, children playing on swings, couples walking dogs, teenagers taking selfies by the shore, felt surreal given what we were discussing. Can I show you something? Lena asked. She rolled up the sleeve of her sweater, revealing her left forearm. There, burned into the skin in neat block letters, was an alphanumeric code, H4X91. I discovered this 3 months ago, she said. Went to take a shower and there it was, like someone had branded me while I slept. No memory of getting it. No pain. Just there. The code meant nothing to me, but looking at it triggered that familiar itch in my brain. The same feeling I got when I heard certain phrases or saw specific patterns. Have you tried to find others? I asked. I've found 12 so far. All with similar stories, all with the scars, though not everyone has the brand. We think it might indicate different functions. Functions? Lena's expression darkened. We weren't all trained for the same thing, Caleb. Some were programmed for information gathering, others for infiltration, some for ... Killing. Yes. I thought about the man in the chair, the fear in his eyes, the tools on the table. How do we know when we've been activated? That's the problem, she said. We don't. The programming is designed to make us forget. We could be going about our normal lives, and then one day we hear a trigger phrase, and suddenly we're someone else. When we come back to ourselves, we remember nothing. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. I've been documenting everything. News reports of unexplained deaths, missing persons cases, unsolved crimes in areas where our people have had episodes. The pattern is disturbing. I opened the folder and immediately wished I hadn't. Newspaper clippings, police reports, obituaries. a businessman found dead in his hotel room in Atlanta, apparent heart attack but no previous cardiac issues. A journalist who'd been investigating defence contractors, car accident on a clear day with perfect road conditions. A federal judge, suicide by hanging, though friends and family insisted he'd never shown signs of depression. We think these might be activations, Lena said quietly. People eliminating threats to whoever's running this program. I felt sick. How do we stop it? I don't know if we can, but I think they're planning something bigger. The episodes are getting more frequent. More of us are waking up with missing time. And yesterday, she pulled out one more document, a printout from a news website dated 3 days earlier. Defence contractor. Executive found dead in home. Marcus Webb, 58, Senior Vice President of Titan Defence Solutions, was found dead in his Potomac home Tuesday evening. Police are treating the death as suspicious. Webb had recently been scheduled to testify before a congressional committee investigating military contracts. Webb was looking into black budget programs from the Cold War era, Lena said, including Hermes. He'd been trying to identify survivors, gathering evidence for his testimony. I stared at the article, and a terrible suspicion began to form. When did he die? Tuesday night, around 11 p.m, according to the coroner. Tuesday night. The night I'd woken up in my kitchen at 3 a.m. with dirt under my fingernails and blood on my shirt. The night I'd told Sarah I must have had a nosebleed. Lena, I said carefully, do you know what Marcus Webb looked like? She showed me his photograph from the news article. Mid-50s, greying hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The face was familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. I'd seen him before. In a dream, I thought. Or maybe not a dream at all. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Friday night in January. I'd been sleeping poorly for weeks, lying awake, listening to Sarah's steady breathing, and trying to convince myself that Marcus Webb's death was a coincidence, that the blood on my shirt had been from a nosebleed, that the gaps in my memory were just stress-related episodes. But deep down, I knew better. The phone rang twice before I answered it, my hand trembling as I lifted the receiver in the darkness. Hello? Silence on the other end, then a soft click in the dial tone. I was replacing the handset when I heard it, not from the phone, but from somewhere else. A voice speaking directly into my ear, though no one was there. The moon is full in Shanghai. My body went rigid. The familiar numbness spread through my limbs, and the last thing I remembered was the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears like thunder. I was walking through a parking garage, underground, dimly lit, the kind of anonymous concrete space that exists beneath every office building in America. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I moved with purpose toward a specific car, a dark sedan parked near the elevator bank. The keys were in my hand, though I didn't remember picking them up. I knew exactly where I was going, though I'd never been here before. Everything felt automatic, pre-programmed, like a player piano performing a song embedded in its metal cylinder. The drive took 40 minutes. I navigated through suburban streets with perfect confidence, making turns without conscious thought, until I arrived at a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighbourhood. The kind of place where people mowed their lawns on weekends and knew their neighbours' names. I parked 3 houses down and waited. At 11:43 p.m, a light came on in an upstairs window. A man's silhouette appeared briefly, tall, thin, moving with the careful precision of someone who thought he was safe in his own home. Dr. Raymond Fletcher, age 67. Retired psychiatrist who had worked for military contractors in the 1970s and 80s. Recently contacted by journalists asking questions about experimental programs involving children. I knew all of this without knowing how I knew it. The lock on Dr. Fletcher's back door took 30 seconds to bypass. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of an old clock in the hallway. I moved through the rooms like I'd been there before, avoiding the creaky floorboards, stepping around furniture that I somehow knew would be in my path. Dr. Fletcher was in his study, sitting at a desk covered with files and photographs. He looked up when I entered, and his face went white. "Dear God," he whispered. "You're one of them." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. "M17410, he continued, his voice shaking. "I remember you. You were one of the successful ones." He reached for the phone on his desk, but I was faster. My hand clamped down on his wrist with mechanical precision. "Please," he said. "I was just following orders. I was trying to help those children. I tried to make the program more humane." More humane. As if there had been a humane way to turn children into weapons. The tools I needed were in a leather case I'd brought with me, though I didn't remember packing it. Surgical instruments, drugs, devices designed to make death look natural. A heart attack, perhaps. Or stroke. The kind of medical emergency that wouldn't raise questions about a 67-year-old man. Dr. Fletcher's eyes widened as I opened the case. "The activation phrase," he said desperately. "I can tell you the deactivation sequence. You don't have to do this." But I wasn't listening anymore. The programming had taken full control, and Caleb Monroe was just a passenger in his own body, watching through glass as his hands did things he would never choose to do. I woke up in my own bed at 6 a.m, Sarah's alarm clock buzzing insistently on the nightstand. My wife was already up, moving around the bedroom, gathering clothes for her shower. "You were restless last night," she said, without looking at me. "Talking in your sleep again." I sat up carefully, testing my body for signs of what had happened. My clothes were clean. My hands showed no traces of blood or dirt. But when I checked the pockets of the jeans I'd worn to bed, I found a business card I'd never seen before. Dr. Raymond Fletcher, Ph.D., Psychiatric Consulting, Arlington, Virginia. The card was slightly bent, as if it had been handled repeatedly. On the back, someone had written in pencil, "The sparrow knows when to fly home." I turned on the morning news while Sarah was in the shower, scrolling through local channels until I found what I was looking for. Arlington police are investigating the death of a retired psychiatrist found in his home early this morning. Dr. Raymond Fletcher, 67, appears to have died of natural causes, though the investigation is ongoing. The reporter was standing in front of a modest two-story house that looked exactly like the one from my dream, or my memory. I was no longer sure there was a difference. My phone rang as I was getting dressed for work. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognise. "Hello?" This time there was no silence. A woman's voice, crisp and professional, spoke immediately. "Subject M17410, status report." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the phone trembling in my hand. Who is this? Mission completed successfully. Await further instructions. I don't understand. I don't remember. You're not supposed to remember. That's the point. The woman's voice was patient but firm, like a teacher explaining something obvious to a slow student. Dr. Fletcher was attempting to expose classified information. His silence has been ensured. I didn't kill anyone. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie, or at least it wasn't the whole truth. Caleb Monroe didn't kill anyone, the voice agreed. But you're not just Caleb Monroe, are you? You're also M17-410, and M17-410 is very good at his job. The line went dead. I sat on my bed for a long time, staring at the business card in my hand. Dr. Fletcher had tried to warn me, had offered to give me a deactivation sequence. But the programming hadn't allowed me to listen. It had used my body to silence the one person who might have been able to set me free. The worst part wasn't the killing, though that was terrible enough. The worst part was how natural it had felt. The final revelation came through Lena. She called me 2 days after the Fletcher incident, her voice tight with fear and urgency. "They're cleaning house," she said without preamble. 3 of our people died yesterday. Natural causes, according to the authorities, but I know better. I met her at the same park where we'd first spoken, but this time she looked different. Haunted. Her carefully maintained composure had cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. It's an exit protocol, she explained as we walked along the shore of the lake. When a program like Hermes gets too old, too exposed, they eliminate the evidence, all of it. You mean us? I mean us. She handed me a manila folder, thicker than the last one. I found this in my apartment yesterday morning. Someone had been inside while I was gone, left it on my kitchen table. The folder contained what looked like personnel files, 23 documents, each with a photograph and basic information. I recognised some of the faces from Lena's earlier research, middle-aged men and women living ordinary lives, unaware that they were ticking time bombs. My file was third from the top. Subject, M17410, Monroe Caleb James. Status, active specialisation, elimination sanitation trigger. Phrases, redacted. Exit protocol. Authorised exit protocol, I read aloud. What does that mean? Lena turned to a page near the back of the folder. It was a single sheet of paper with official-looking letterhead, though the organisation name was blacked out. Termination procedures. Project Hermes. When operational assets become compromised or unnecessary, the following protocol should be implemented. 1. Asset will receive activation call containing exit phrase 2. Asset will comply with self-termination directive 3. Death will appear consistent with suicide or accidental death 4. All associated documentation will be destroyed. Exit phrase. The tulip field is empty. I stared at the words, feeling that familiar itch in my brain. Even reading the phrase triggered something, a kind of sleepy compliance that made my limbs feel heavy. They're going to kill us, I said. They're going to make us kill ourselves, Lena corrected. Just like they made us kill others. One phone call and we'll walk into traffic or jump from a building or put a gun to our heads, and we'll never even know why. There has to be a way to stop it. Maybe. Dr. Martinez has been working with deprogramming techniques, trying to break down the conditioning, but it takes time, and I don't think we have much left. As if summoned by her words, my cell phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, unknown number. Don't answer it, Lena said urgently. But my hand was already moving toward the phone, acting on impulses I couldn't control. The programming didn't just respond to activation phrases. It responded to patterns, to situations, to the simple act of a phone ringing at the wrong time. I answered the call. Hello? Silence. Then a soft click. I was about to hang up when I heard it. Faint but unmistakable, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. The tulip field is empty. The world went grey around the edges. My vision tunnelled. Somewhere far away I could hear Lena calling my name, but her voice seemed to be coming from another planet. The phone fell from my hand as my body began to move with mechanical precision. I walked toward the lake with steady, unhurried steps. The water was cold and dark, and I understood with perfect clarity that I was going to walk into it and keep walking until the water closed over my head. It would look like an accident. A man who'd slipped on the muddy bank and couldn't swim well enough to save himself. Sarah would grieve, but she'd move on. The insurance company would pay out my policy. No one would ask uncomfortable questions about government programs or childhood trauma, or the terrible things that some people were capable of doing in the name of national security. I was ankle deep in the lake when Lena tackled me. We went down hard in the shallow water, her arms wrapped around my chest, her voice in my ear repeating something over and over. The sparrow flies home when the rain stops. The sparrow flies home when the rain stops. A counter-phrase. Something Dr. Martinez had developed, maybe, or something Lena had discovered in her research. The words cut through the fog in my brain like sunlight through clouds, and suddenly I was myself again, sitting in cold lake water with my clothes soaked and my heart hammering against my ribs. "Are you okay?" Lena asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if okay was a word that could ever apply to me again. "How did you know that would work?" I didn't. It was a guess based on some of Dr. Martinez's notes about linguistic triggers. We think the programming can be disrupted if you introduce conflicting commands at the right moment. We climbed out of the water and sat on the muddy bank, both of us shivering in the January air. Around us, the park continued its peaceful suburban existence. Children played on swings. Couples walked hand in hand along the paths. No one paid attention to two middle-aged people sitting fully clothed beside a lake, looking like survivors of some invisible disaster. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we run," Lena said. "We disappear before they can try again. New identities, new lives, somewhere far from here. And spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Better than spending no life at all." She was right, of course. But as I sat there in my wet clothes watching normal people live their normal lives, I couldn't shake the feeling that running would never be enough. The programming was still inside me, dormant but not dead. And somewhere, in offices with no names and files with no official existence, people were still pulling strings. "There might be another way," I said slowly. "What do you mean?" I thought about Dr. Fletcher, about the fear in his eyes when he'd recognised me, about the business card in my pocket and the words written on the back, "The sparrow knows when to fly home." "What if we didn't run?" I said. "What if we went hunting instead?" I'm writing this in a motel room outside Tucson, Arizona. It's been 6 months since Burke Lake, 6 months since Lena and I decided to turn predator instead of prey. We've found 11 of them so far. The handlers, the programmers, the administrators who built children into weapons and then discarded them when the political winds changed. Some died quickly. Others, we gave time to explain themselves, to justify what they'd done to kids who trusted adults to protect them. None of their explanations were sufficient. Lena thinks we're making a difference, that we're preventing future Hermes programs from taking root. Maybe she's right. But I suspect the truth is simpler and more disturbing. We're doing exactly what we were programmed to do. We're eliminating threats to national security. It's just that now the threats happen to be the people who created us. The mirror in this motel bathroom is cracked down the middle, dividing my reflection into two slightly misaligned halves. Sometimes I stare at it and try to figure out which half is Caleb Monroe and which is M17-410. Other times I wonder if there was ever really a difference. Sarah filed for divorce 3 months ago. I don't blame her. How do you stay married to someone who disappears for weeks at a time and can't explain where he's been? How? Tonight's narrative is called Project Selene, a conspiracy thriller about a hidden archive, lost tapes, and the truth behind the moon landing. We'll journey through old NASA film reels, half-forgotten storage vaults, and the unravelling mind of a single archivist who stumbles upon footage that challenges the official version of humanity's greatest technological triumph, the 1969 moon landing. Our protagonist, Nolan Price, is no hero or super spy, just a quiet technician with a meticulous eye for detail. As he uncovers more evidence of an elaborate stage set and repeated take calls, watchers close in. The line between fact and hoax warps. Has the entire lunar narrative been meticulously faked? And if so, who orchestrated it? And how far will they go to keep it hidden? So find a comfortable position. Maybe in bed with the lights low, or in a cosy chair as midnight drifts closer. Let your breathing slow. You'll sink into the flicker of analogue film, that soft whir of a projector spinning old reels. Perhaps the gentle hum of a reel-to-reel tape resonates in the background. As we pass each chapter, you'll see how obsession can bloom from a single stray frame, and how the story of one small step for man might have been filmed under glaring stage lights all along. Remember, what follows is a work of fiction with a dash of what if, but sometimes those who ask what if unravel illusions that were never meant to be seen. Let's begin. With the hush of a locked storage facility, a reclusive archivist, and a battered cardboard box of tapes labelled Project Selene. Nolan Price stood outside the cinder-block walls of an abandoned government warehouse on the outskirts of Houston. The midday sun beat down on cracked pavement. He clutched a letter from Arcadia Aerospace Solutions, a private contractor that handled everything from satellite design to climate data. They had found references to ancient NASA reels in a sealed corner of a facility left over from the Cold War. The letter said Nolan, a freelance film restoration specialist, was chosen to digitize them. Urgent for historical archiving, they claimed. The pay was good, suspiciously good. Nolan stared at the weathered steel door. A single guard in a dusty uniform waved him in, already expecting him. Inside, the air was stale with the odour of old cardboard and decaying reel canisters. Flickering fluorescent lights revealed rows of shelves stuffed with NASA-labelled boxes, many slashed or water-damaged. This was typical. NASA's official archives were famed for mishaps, lost tapes of early rocket tests, missing telemetry from the Apollo missions. But something about Arcadia's hush-hush approach set Nolan on edge. A short, grey-suited woman introduced herself as Madison Harlow, acting as Arcadia's liaison. Without fanfare, she led him to a small side room, a makeshift editing suite they'd rigged with a battered 16mm projector, a spool rewinder, and a digital capture device. Stacks of reels labelled Apollo 11 RAW, Apollo 12 AVA, Saturn telemetry and a curious mark, Selene, or SB footage. Harlow told him, "Your job's simple. Transfer them to high-resolution digital. Mark any anomalies or degrade. No public commentary, no copies, understood?" Her tone was matter-of-fact but severe. Nolan didn't argue. He'd done hush projects before, and the hush came from corporate sensitivity or undisclosed research. Usually it was benign, so he shrugged. "Sure, I'll keep it discreet." She gave him a passkey, instructions on the alarm system, then left with final words. "We want it done swiftly, there's a schedule." Over the next few days, Nolan methodically fed reels into the projector, capturing them via a specialised scanner. In the first wave, he found typical NASA mission logs, rocket staging, crew training, pre-launch interviews. The colour had faded, the audio scratchy but recognisable, ground control chatter, astronauts reciting checklists. He found it a bit mesmerising. The old swirl of a countdown, boosters roaring. A shame these tapes had gathered dust. On day 3, he encountered the first odd reel. A label read, Apollo 11 Stage B, Take 3. The word Take 3 was strange. NASA mission reels usually said T-plus timeline or mission date references, not take. He shrugged, loaded it. The footage flickered. A wide shot of what looked like a lunar surface mock-up. Astronaut suits in frame, then a voice off screen, "Positions and action!" The two suited figures hopped across the grey dust. One stumbled. A faint laugh was heard. Then another voice, "Cut, cut, we'll reset. The reflection's too bright on the visor." Nolan's heart pounded. This was no standard rocket or EVA footage. It looked like a staged film set, complete with overhead lighting rigs. The black backdrop was a poor simulation of starless lunar sky. You could see wires in the corner. Shaken, Nolan reversed the reel to confirm. Indeed, there was an assistant carrying a boom mic half hidden behind an artificial crater. The date code on the reel said 7/19/1969, the day before the public broadcast of Apollo 11's first moonwalk. Could this be a training simulation? NASA did have partial staging for practice, as yet the clapper, board reading Take 3, and the director's voice implying an actual production unsettled him. He digitized it, flagged it as anomaly, and moved on. Over the next few canisters, normal mission footage resumed, so he chalked it up to a weird test shoot. NASA might have used it for PR or promotional B-roll. But that night, lying in a cheap motel, Nolan replayed the snippet in his mind. Why such hush around these older reels? NASA training footage was typically labelled as such. The next morning he dug deeper. Opening a battered can labelled Selene B, he discovered a reel that started with a NASA colour bar pattern, then abruptly cut to a behind-the-scenes environment. Men in suits conferring around what looked like a partial lunar lander set. A man in a white shirt read from a script. Lunar surface continuity, camera feed approach. We must ensure the horizon line matches the predicted lens angle. Another man wearing thick-rimmed glasses nodded. We fake it right, or we fail. Understood? Nolan's breath quickened. This was no trivial training. The group on tape specifically talked about fooling an audience. They discussed vantage angles to hide stage edges, how the overhead rig should mimic low gravity. One phrase jumped out. Public must see only the broadcast feed from the designated channel. He set the reel aside, heart pounding. This was conspiratorial gold. Actual evidence of a potential staged moon landing scenario. It defied everything taught in history. NASA had always faced accusations by conspiracy buffs about the mid-9 moon landing being shot in a Hollywood set, referencing anomalies in flagged photos. But mainstream science easily refuted them. Yet these tapes, if real, it was the smoking gun. Then again, it could be a hoax, decades later staged footage. But the film stock was definitely vintage, and that the audio matched 1960s analog characteristics. With sweaty palms, Nolan rummaged more, finding references to PSH Kubrick liaison. Could this be referencing famed director Stanley Kubrick? The name was never spelled out fully, but S. Kukub, the idea was insane. He'd heard rumours Kubrick was asked by NASA to film backup footage for crisis scenarios. The next reel's label read Moon Landing Studio Revan. The conspiracy was intensifying. That evening, a creeping sense of paranoia took hold. He locked the reels in a small closet. The quiet facility seemed ominous, as though someone was always behind the next aisle. Indeed, he glimpsed shadows near the corridor, possibly just the overhead lamp flicker. He decided to finish digitizing these suspicious reels quickly, keep copies, then reevaluate. Returning to the main workstation, he discovered his second shock. The tape labelled Apollo 11 Stage B Take 3 was missing. He'd left it on the spool an hour ago. Now it was gone. He checked the entire room, the desk, the case, nowhere. Another reel was in its place, labelled simply Selene E. Do Not Watch. This was no accident. Someone knew he'd found the suspicious content. They replaced it with a cryptic reel, possibly a warning or a booby trap. Heart pounding, Nolan placed Selene E. in the projector, through Hosty overriding caution. The film began with static, then an image of an empty crater. A whisper reversed. This is not for you. Turn back. Flickers of random rocket footage, spliced with the face of an older man in a half-lit room, mouthing silent words. Then more static. End. Nolan realised he'd become entangled in something bigger. The label Project Selene likely referred to a top-secret operation controlling the lunar narrative. Could it be real? Or was it an elaborate mind game? He decided to approach Dr. Eliza Trent, a known NASA contractor turned historian, for help verifying authenticity. Because if these tapes were real, the entire 1999 moon landing story was a crafted facade, and if that were true, the forces behind it wouldn't let the truth emerge easily. Thus, Nolan closed up for the night, feeling the weight of newly awakened illusions. Tomorrow he'd contact Dr. Trent. For now, though, he had to check the facility's locks, ensure no further reels vanished. A faint static-like voice echoed in his head. We told them we went to the moon, and they believed. He shivered. If indeed the event that defined modern history was a cinematic hoax, the question loomed: who orchestrated it, and how far would they go to bury the truth? True to his plan, Nolan Price found himself the next morning outside a modest office building in downtown Houston, where Dr. Eliza Trent ran her small consultancy on aerospace history. She was a slight, sharp-eyed woman in her early 50s, known for her precise knowledge of NASA's public records. He introduced himself under an alias, but she recognised the name from an earlier phone message. "Ah, you're the archivist with something urgent to show me." Inside her cluttered office, he carefully produced a hidden thumb drive with a few scanned clips. Dr. Trent popped it into her laptop. Scenes of the suspicious moon set played, along with bits of Celine B references. Her eyebrows rose. She zoomed in on certain frames, analysing the film grain, the speech patterns, the design of the suits. "This could be incredibly damning if authentic," she whispered. "But it also might be a sophisticated fake. I've seen hoaxes before. Let me cross-check specifics, production lot stamps on the film stock, the older NASA logos or pass badges." Nolan recounted the bizarre reel swaps, the reversed whispers on Celine E, and the missing spool from the previous night. Dr. Trent's fare turned grim. "If you're telling the truth, you're in danger. People don't just vanish these reels for fun. NASA had a long official stance that all major mission footage was stored, minus some lost in time, but never anything indicating a staged event." She paused, adjusting her glasses. There were rumours among older engineers, talk of a fallback plan if the real mission feed failed, but never solid proof. This might be it, or more, and they spent hours verifying minute details. A NASA mission patch visible in a corner, background voices referencing angle matches real module altitude. Dr. Trent began to suspect the tapes were genuine. She also recognised one face from an older NASA group photo, a certain black-suited figure who never stepped in front of official cameras, rumoured to be a media liaison. He was hush-hush, rumoured to coordinate with a big Hollywood name, possibly Kubrick. Dr. Trent offered a possible motive. During the Cold War, the pressure to beat the Soviets was immense. If real landings were uncertain, they might have staged footage as a failsafe. But from these tapes, it looks more elaborate. A total simulation? She exhaled. This changes everything. She urged Nolan to gather more evidence, but do it safely. That night they parted ways, planning to regroup once she did further checks in NASA's official archives. Meanwhile, Nolan returned to the old facility. The next morning he discovered the entire building locked, a renovation sign posted by Arcadia. Harlow, the liaison, was nowhere. Security had orders that no one enters, as the project was on hold. Furious, Nolan realised they intended to shut down any further rummaging. He tried to call Harlow's number, disconnected. The job was effectively over. The suspicious reels presumably removed. He retreated to his small apartment, heart pounding. If the conspirators had the tapes again, that left him with only a few digital copies. Enough maybe if the file survived. He backed them up to multiple flash drives, but as he tried emailing Dr. Trent more footage, an error flagged. File blocked, suspicious content. Some large-scale infiltration of his system was in effect. The Watchers were definitely onto him. In the swirl came a break. Rummaging through older unlabelled reels he'd already digitized, he found an odd snippet showing a man in a starkly lit corner, mid-70s style, glancing nervously at the camera. The film was scratched and audio was reversed. By reversing the track, Nolan deciphered fragments. Project Celine? Never meant to see. We built illusions for a greater cause. The man coughed, spat out. We lied. Or we lost the war. I left a final record in the Saturn archives. Then static. Confused, Nolan tried to see if Saturn archives might reference Saturn V rocket logs, but Dr. Trent had all standard Saturn V data. Possibly it referred to a hidden code or a separate repository. The man in the clip might be the archivist, or Red Hand, the rumoured original whistleblower. If Goa, his message suggested a bigger trove of evidence existed somewhere else, presumably safer than the official NASA channels. Maybe that trove spelled out the entire impetus behind faking, or partially faking, the moon landings. Nolan phoned to Trent again. She was frantic. Her home office had been ransacked, old NASA microfilms stolen, and suspicious men in suits loomed outside her building. She believed Arcadia Aerospace was a front for a deeper Black Ops group. She suggested they meet in a public place with the new reel. Nolan agreed, setting a meet at a busy bus station. However, the next day she never arrived. Her phone went dead. In parallel, an eerie wave of accidents claimed 2 older NASA retirees who'd been tangentially tied to the lunar era. Stroke, heart attack, but the timing reeked of cover-up. The media said nothing, overshadowed by typical news cycles, but a small corner of online conspiracy forums lit up. Moon archivist missing, spike in NASA retiree deaths, Project Selene rumour intensifies. One forum user named Apollo Truth posted a cryptic line, "Look to LB7, the final broadcast is hidden." Nolan recognised LB might be Lunar Base 7, some old reference from the tapes. Or maybe LB7 was code for a hidden stage. He rummaged the digitised catalogue, eventually unearthing a label that matched. L. the Devontost footage. Opening it, he found bizarre outtakes, an entire set with rovers, multiple crater backdrops, and a partial script reading, "The audience sees only the final cut." Another snippet showed a NASA official saying, "We can't let them see the starfield difference. We'll keep it black." It confirmed the idea. The official moon footage was heavily edited, possibly reshot. As tension soared, Nolan sensed the watchers nearing. Strange cars lingered near his apartment. The old building caretaker told him men asked about him, flashing some government ID. Fearing for his life, Nolan packed the digitised reels, stashed them in a battered suitcase, and hopped on a night bus out of town. He had one lead, a mention from Dr. Trent about the domain of the final transmissions, an alleged secret NASA comm station in the desert, which might hold old telemetry backups. If the watchers stored illusions in reels, maybe the raw signals existed, real or fake, that confirm the staged transmissions. That might be the final piece to prove everything. Exhausted, he slumped in a bus seat, the flicker of highway lights passing. He felt haunted by the question. If they never truly landed men on the moon, what did that imply about decades of scientific progress, cultural memory, even the illusions of human achievement? The scale of deception would be monstrous. Or maybe the real landings happened, but the televised footage was partly staged. The puzzle was too big, but the watchers clearly wanted him silent. He closed his eyes, drifting into half-sleep, hearing static-laced audio. "We told them we were first. The Soviets believed. We soared," a voice whispered. Project Selene was the key to winning hearts, no matter the cost. He jolted awake, heart pounding. Could the cost now be his life? Thus, we near the threshold of the final confrontation. A hidden station, possibly guarded by those preserving the illusions, and a desperate archivist determined to reveal the truth, no matter the personal toll. The watchers circle like wolves. Dr. Trent is missing, and the ghostly voice of the archivist from the 1970s beckons him onward to the final spool that might shatter the world's beloved myth. A dusty desert highway led Nolan Price to a sign half rusted and unreadable. The day was scorching, reminiscent of a place NASA once tested rovers or illusions of them. Lacking a car, Nolan walked hours from the bus drop-off, carrying a battered duffel, loaded with the crucial reels and a battered laptop. He was guided only by a rumour of a closed NASA comm station, rumoured to have moon feed backups. If he could find that station, he might locate the original uncut transmissions, or a final log from the Watchers themselves, validating the entire hoax. The Watchers were not far behind. They had resources to track phone pings, credit usage, license plate scanners, but Nolan used none of those, moving off-grid. Still, he sensed their presence, a drone overhead. He saw no sign, but the desert was wide, the sky empty of clues. Each day felt like an infiltration mission. At dusk on the second day, he stumbled upon a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, leading to a small cluster of squat buildings. A sign read NASA Remote Telemetry Nummerbekämpfen Abandoned. But motion sensors beeped faintly. He clipped a corner of the fence, slid through. The main door was locked, but with a rusted handle. He pried it open with a crowbar borrowed from a shed. Inside the facility lay dark, stale air, thick with dust. A backup generator might still exist. With a flicker of old fluorescent lighting, he found a control room lined with defunct monitors, consoles labelled Apollo, Gemini, Deep Space TLM. A wave of awe overcame him. This was NASA's old telemetry link? Possibly used for receiving or broadcasting signals. If the Watchers wanted illusions maintained, they'd keep some gear here. Indeed, a corner door had fresh locks. Summoning nerve, Nolan forced it open, numban, revealing a smaller side lab with modern hardware. This wasn't as abandoned as it seemed. He rummaged, discovering a functioning terminal with a note pinned, "Archive Selene, authorized access only." Bingo. He booted it, hooking up his laptop to the console. The system asked for credentials. He typed a guess. Selene. No luck. Another guess. Apollo 1969. Another fail. Searching the desk, he found a slip with partial codes referencing Tranquility Base. He typed it. The screen flashed green. He was in. File directories indicated live stage feed 69, simulation mix upped, broadcast cut. This validated the idea that at least partial coverage had been simulated. Another folder read Archive Trent Comms. That name. Was that Dr. Eliza Trent? Possibly her attempt to gather data. He opened it, a partial video showing Dr. Trent forcibly questioned by men in suits. She pleaded, "We can't let them keep lying. People deserve..." Then the video ended. Nolan reeled with horror. She'd been captured. He had to act fast. The Watchers would realise the system was accessed. He found an old satellite uplink control ironically used in the 60s for deep space transmissions. If it still worked, he could broadcast a direct feed of these unedited files to multiple open frequencies, unstoppable by typical net censorship. A perfect final broadcast. He rummaged for cables, hooking everything up. The generator hummed. The old dish on the facility's roof squeaked into position. The console flickered with an option. Signal frequencies, low Earth channels, civil comms, even random radio bands. He could saturate them all. He selected the files, raw footage of the staged moon sets, outtakes with directors, plus newly discovered voice logs referencing, "We never left Earth, we built illusions." He included the Dr. Trent clip, proving Watchers had her. Tapping transmit, he waited for the progress bar. Slowly it climbed, 10%, 20%. Then boots on concrete outside. The Watchers had arrived. They swarmed in, flashlights cutting beams in the dusty corridors. He jammed a filing cabinet against the door. Gunfire erupted from the hallway. The broadcast was at 60%. If he could hold them off a few more minutes, the entire world would see the raw data. Shots tore through the flimsy door. Splinters flew. The Watchers forced an entry. Nolan, crouching behind a console, tapped a final override to lock the station's outer doors. The Watchers hammered at them from within. They must have cut an external fence, but the building's metal doors might by seconds. The bar rose to 80%. Sparks flew as the Watchers tried to break the console. Nolan fired a single-shot flare pistol he had found, more a diversion than a weapon. The Watchers scattered, returning heavy fire. The console took hits, but the broadcast still beeped along. 90% of them. In a swirl of chaos, the Watchers overcame the obstacles, stepping into the lab. Their lead figure, masked, raised a rifle. "Stop this now," he barked. "We'll kill you. No one else has to die." Nolan shouted back, voice trembling. "It's done. The world will see. Will see." The masked man tried yanking cables, but Nolan had built in multiple backup processes. The bar soared to 95%. The Watchers, furious, advanced with a lethal calm. 100% of the console beeped a final success. The data soared into the satellite channels. Unstoppable. The Watchers realised they'd lost. The masked man hissed, "Then we'll bury you." He aimed. A shot rang out. Nolan felt a searing pain in his chest. He collapsed, choking for breath, seeing the Watchers scramble to destroy equipment that no longer mattered. The feed was out, unstoppable. In a swirl of darkness, he glimpsed a faint screen that read, "Broadcast to 12 frequencies, transmission complete." At that moment, across various radio channels, TV backups, and online nodes, the footage played. People saw the raw set, heard staged arrests, they saw men referencing the final show, instructing astronauts how to move in moon gravity. The illusions were no longer rumour or partial. The entire mosaic was out. Social media exploded. Even those who had refused to doubt the official narrative watched in shock. By the next day, an unstoppable wave of meltdown overcame news outlets, overshadowing watchers' attempts to disclaim. Nolan lay on the floor, vision fading. The watchers, done with him, turned to vanish into the night, the clang of their boots receding. In his final moments, he recalled the reel with the old archivist's voice. "We told them we left Earth. We never had to." He felt a strange calm, believing that at least he had completed the mission. Perhaps Dr. Trent would see the broadcast and survive. The next morning, the world awoke to the shock of unfiltered footage spreading across every major and minor digital platform. Twitter, ephemeral streaming sites, pirate radio channels. The images showed the alleged set for the moon landing. Dusty sound stages, mocked-up craters, overhead rigging. Audio capturing NASA officials and alleged Hollywood technicians planning each scene. For many, this was an utter betrayal of faith in humankind's greatest triumph. For others, it vindicated decades of suspicion. Debates raged over how much was real or whether some actual missions occurred, but the televised parts were faked. NASA and the White House scrambled to disclaim the footage, calling it forged propaganda. Yet the level of detail referencing actual mission rosters and behind-the-scenes technical talk was too well constructed for a simple hoax. Media responded in a frenzy. Reputable outlets tried to decode the timeline. Was it partial or total fakery? Did NASA still go physically to the moon while using stage broadcasts as a backup? The footage suggested a grand pre-arranged deception. A few ex-astronauts vehemently denied the claims, but curiously some had died or refused interviews. Conspiracy forums, ironically, now found themselves mainstream. Everyone had a stake in the truth. If the Mardenid broadcast was faked, what else had been manipulated in history, and how many watchers lurked behind official illusions? Arcadia Aerospace, the front that hired Nolan, came under intense scrutiny. Their offices claimed ignorance, stating, "We believed it was standard NASA archival material." Their press statements were overshadowed by insider leaks that Arcadia was deeply connected to old intelligence circles. Government statements insisted an internal investigation was underway. All typical deflections. Meanwhile, the public demanded answers. Protests outside NASA centres soared. People carried signs reading, "We deserve the real truth." In the hush of those gatherings, tearful individuals who once admired Neil Armstrong's moonwalk felt gut-punched by the notion that they'd been shown a grand cinema piece. Sarah Voss re-emerged, having fled watchers. She published a scathing editorial, Project Selene, the greatest story never told, detailing her collaboration with Nolan, the missing reels, and the final broadcast. She confirmed that Nolan likely perished after ensuring the transmissions went live. She praised him as a tragic hero. Reaction poured in from across the world, sorrow that his name would be tied to the Moonlie revelation, but gratitude for exposing it. Hashtags at Project Selene and #MoonHoax soared. NASA's official line, "We categorically deny any mission staging. We continue to investigate maliciously edited footage." But cracks appeared among NASA retirees. Some older engineers told reporters about strange security around certain broadcast trucks in 1969. A caretaker from an old film studio stepped forward, claiming she once saw moon set pieces. In short, the edifice of absolute certainty crumbled. In a hidden place, elders from the original Project Selene, if that was truly the operation's name, hunkered down. They'd spent decades ensuring the official story overshadowed any rumours, Now, with everything public, the question was whether to attempt a final push to disclaim or vanish. Some watchers apparently vanished from the scene, leaving cryptic footprints. Possibly they'd moved on to new illusions. Possibly they recognised the unstoppable wave. Some found solace in the idea that humans still had the technology or impetus to land on the moon, but needed backup show. Others believed the entire Apollo program was a monstrous PR operation, that no real landing ever happened. A subset of the population refused to believe the footage at all, labelling it advanced deep fake. Society felt fractured, uncertain if to champion or condemn the memory of NASA's achievements. Meanwhile, Dr. Eliza Trent, recovered from captivity, gave a quiet interview confirming she'd found data logs describing the staged broadcast, though she suspected some real lunar missions did happen later, overshadowed by the initial fake spectacle. It was a political necessity, she suggested, in a time of desperate Cold War posturing. But the cost to collective trust is immeasurable. A year later, controversies raged on. New historians wrote The Selene Deception, exploring how the faked footage overshadowed a partial genuine mission. Hollywood churned out docudramas. Some revered the fallen archivist Nolan Price as a modern champion of truth. Conspiracy watchers called him the man who dethroned the biggest lie in human history. Meanwhile, certain scientists lamented that the overshadowing confusion might hamper genuine space exploration dreams. If the world concluded it was all illusions, interest in real missions might fade. In the dusty corners of a thrift store in rural Florida, a battered film labelled Selene C Launch Rehearsal 5 sat unnoticed among old VHS tapes, possibly a leftover reel not confiscated by watchers. A curious shopper glimpsed it, recognised the NASA imprint, and thought it might be valuable. They purchased it for $1. The can sat in a living room shelf. If they ever played it, they'd see a single take that never made it into the final broadcast. An astronaut stumbling under bright stage lights, removing his helmet mid-moonwalk, complaining about the heat. The Khan's label was faint. For final illusions, keep locked. Another piece of the puzzle, lost to time, or maybe waiting for the next curious soul. As for Nolan, rumours swirled that he might have survived. A fisherman off the Gulf Coast claimed to have given a ride to a quiet man with old film spools in his bag. A small-time blogger said she received an unsigned letter thanking her for defending the truth, but no one truly knew. If he lived, it would be as an eternal wanderer, overshadowed by the legacy that Project Selene was no longer hush-hush. Illusions can define an era, forging national unity or stoking pride. But illusions, once unmasked, can unravel decades of trust, leaving a battered society to pick up the pieces. In the hush of each new night, we might look at the moon, that pale disk in the sky, wondering if humans truly touched its surface as claimed, or if the cosmic stage was an elaborate reflection of ambition and fear. The search for the unvarnished truth, ironically, stands as a testament to the restless curiosity within all who gaze upward. In the end, Project Selene remains the darkest footnote in the history of human aspiration, a conspiratorial reminder that ambition without honesty can produce a triumph with no foundation. And in that final hush, the taped voice from an old NASA spool might echo, "We told them it was a great leap for mankind. In truth, it was a single step into the shadows." Our story is called False Skies, a conspiracy thriller about a government's darkest deception and the whistleblower who exposed it. It imagines a world where the worst terror attack in modern history was not only foreseen, but deliberately orchestrated to spark endless war and funnel billions into a sprawling military-industrial complex. Now, 2 decades later, an unassuming former FBI data analyst named Thomas Keane leaks hidden documents that point to a monstrous betrayal and becomes the most wanted man in the nation. Pursued by a shadowy agency determined to keep the official version sealed, Keane races to share the truth with a public reeling from revelations that might reshape the entire post-attack world order. If you find your eyes growing heavy at any point, that's okay. This story is meant to be richly detailed. Perhaps you'll drift to sleep while pondering how fear can become a profitable enterprise, or maybe you'll stay riveted till the final word, uncovering each layer with breathless suspense. Either way, I hope you come away with new insights into how power, once obtained, can cling fiercely to the shadows. Shall we begin? Then settle in, let your breathing slow, and imagine the flicker of old computer screens, top-secret binders, and a few missing pages that change the course of entire nations. This is False Skies, told in 5 parts, each revealing a deeper rung of the labyrinth. Listen closely. The greatest secrets often hide in the quiet corners of official stories. Thomas Keane didn't feel like a revolutionary when he first pressed send. He was simply a man weighed down by guilt, holding a flash drive stuffed with revelations that haunted him for years. The file name he'd chosen of Black Dust gave no hint to the explosive contents. A trove of classified FBI memos, shipping manifests and encrypted communications that, if authenticated, would confirm every darkest rumour about the worst terrorist attack in modern memory. The day of the leak dawned cloudy, ironically anticlimactic for a moment that might reshape history. Keane sat in a dingy motel room near a dusty highway, a battered laptop perched on a wobbly table. The place smelled of stale coffee and regret, but it had functioning Wi-Fi. He checked his secure connection one last time, heart thrumming. With trembling fingers, he uploaded Black Dust to an overseas whistleblower website known for releasing hidden archives. He paused, typed a short note, for the thousands who died and the millions misled. Then he pressed send. Within the hour, that file reached multiple journalists and a global news outlet with a reputation for defying government censors. The outlet's editorial board pored over it, verifying bits of data in a hush of excitement and alarm. By the end of the day, the first breaking story appeared online, overshadowed by disclaimers. Unverified documents claimed to reveal inside plot behind 20-year-old attack. Skeptics rolled their eyes. Conspiracy theorists hailed it as the smoking gun they'd always wanted. Most mainstream media initially dismissed it, an editing glitch, a potential hoax, or AI-generated forgery, the official line insisted. Yet some found the content too consistent to be random fakes. A set of typed memos from high-level intelligence briefings dated months before the attack, discussing the necessity of a catalytic event to unify public support for indefinite overseas campaigns. Detailed logs showed insurance policy expansions on certain tower floors days prior. Even stand-down orders for certain war games suspiciously matched the real timeline. Keane watched from his motel room's flickering TV as a breathless anchor tried to explain the leak, disclaiming that the White House calls it foreign propaganda. He sighed. The official denial had begun. Next would come the manhunt for the leaker. He closed his laptop, stuffed it in a bag and left the motel. Time to vanish. He'd served in the FBI's data analytics wing for nearly a decade, compiling anomaly reports around that fateful day. Step by step, he realized too many coincidences tied private defense contractors, intelligence heads, and financial bigwigs, all who profited from the subsequent wars. He quietly copied reams of old files, awaiting the day he had the courage to blow the whistle. That day had come. Elsewhere, powerful forces mobilized. The intelligence community's upper echelons recognized the name Thomas Keane from previous security audits. They suspected him. Within hours, calls went out from a hush-hush division to find him, brand him as a threat to national security. The director of an ultra-secret agency, Eldridge Shaw, personally oversaw the containment plan. He believed the official story must remain unchallenged, or the entire post-attack order might unravel. By midnight, bulletins labelled Keane suspected hacker and domestic threat. Agents started combing digital footprints, scouring camera feeds from near the FBI building. Shaw himself made a call to a contact at the large media conglomerates, instructing them to bury coverage of the story until further notice. The compliance was near instant. Mainstream news gave minimal airtime to the leak, overshadowing it with other headlines. But the genie was out of the bottle. On social media, the hashtag #BlackDust soared, with amateurs dissecting every memo line. A few data experts cross-referenced the IP addresses in the communications, linking them to known government subdomains. Even the partial revelation stunned the public. If the documents were genuine, it implied that some element within the US establishment not only predicted but abetted the terror event, ensuring maximum casualties for maximum political effect. The phrase false skies emerged, referencing how the public's reality had been manufactured like a painted ceiling above them, concealing the real orchestrators. Within a day, small protests flared outside federal buildings in major cities. People demanded clarity. The government's official statement repeated the forgery or foreign propaganda claim. That evening, hackers with anarchy streaks threatened to leak more verifying files if the mainstream media didn't pick it up. Tensions soared. Meanwhile, the stock market wobbled as rumours of insider deals from decades prior re-emerged. Some corporations connected to military contracting faced plunging shares. Keane watched from a safe house now, a friend's abandoned cabin in the woods. He had only the radio for news, and the swirl of distrust and fury filtered through the static. He dreaded how quickly the establishment might label him a traitor. Indeed, the next morning the FBI publicly named him as a prime suspect in a mass leak of classified data, painting him as an extremist. His old colleagues, uncertain, gave no comment. But behind the scenes, many believed the documents might be real. After all, they recognized Keane's skill in combing data for anomalies. Among the swirl stood a figure named Sarah Voss, an investigative journalist blacklisted from major networks for challenging official 9/11 narratives in the past. She recognized the pattern in these newly leaked documents. They matched puzzle pieces she'd glimpsed in hushed conversation with insiders. She reached out to the new site that hosted the files, leaving an encrypted message. "I can help verify. Let me speak to the source." That message eventually found its way to Keane via an online confidant, setting the stage for an alliance that might shake the entire narrative. Thus, from a dusty hideout, Keane typed a coded reply. The story's real race began. Could he deliver evidence to a credible journalist and blow the entire false narrative wide open before the apparatus of Homeland Security, the very system built on the official someone crushed him? The next step would be forging that alliance with Voss and hoping her instincts for truth outweighed her fear of retribution. For if the government's darkest deception was about to be exposed, those who profited from war would not hesitate to silence him, or anyone else, to keep the official illusions intact. 2 days after the leak, the national conversation roiled in confusion. Official channels insisted the Black Dust documents were an elaborate hoax. Yet smaller media sites posted side-by-side comparisons with legitimate CIA or FBI formatting, showing consistent digital footprints. The public found itself caught between an official narrative and a swirling impetus to question everything. Some believed wholeheartedly in the new revelations, others recoiled or felt threatened by the idea that the last 2 decades of conflict might have been orchestrated. Thomas Keane was already on every national watch list. He'd been a mid-level FBI data analyst until 2 years prior, known for thoroughness but also for quietly raising flags about inconsistent intelligence reports pre-9/11. The day he left the bureau, no one suspected he'd spent months copying old files slated for permanent seal. Now his old supervisors told the press that he was mentally unstable, harbouring extremist theories. They withheld mention that those same theories had nearly led to internal inquiries years ago, until higher-ups quashed them. In a suburban neighbourhood outside the capital, a black SUV pulled up to a modest house. 4 men in plain suits stepped out. They were from a specialised domestic counter-intel unit, effectively an arm of the Black Archive, a covert group rumoured to be tied to intelligence and corporate interests. They forced the occupant, a middle-aged data engineer who once worked with Keane, to open his home computer. They rifled through his messages, seizing any mention of Thomas or black dust or files. This was repeated across multiple homes of ex-FBI colleagues, all without official warrants. The Watchers answered to a higher chain, operating in the shadows. Director Eldridge Shaw, head of a new consolidated intelligence agency formed after 9/11, presided over these manhunts from a sleek government tower. He remembered the day of the attacks vividly, the chaos that allowed the Patriot Act and massive expansions of surveillance. He'd advanced quickly by endorsing these expansions and forging alliances with top defence contractors. Now, seeing the leaked docs threaten that entire architecture, Shaw was determined to snuff out the source. Reeve, or Keane, whatever his name is, must be found, he told subordinates. We cannot let fantasies unravel 2 decades of progress. As the manhunt escalated, Keane lurked in the outskirts. He recognised the checkposts on highways, the routine scanning of licence plates. He switched vehicles, used an old identity pass, and avoided all major city centres. He survived on snack bars and occasional small store purchases with cash only. At night, he found a cheap motel, paying in a borrowed name. Every moment felt like it might bring a black SUV squealing into the lot. The tension weighed on him, gnawing at his nerves. Sarah Voss, the investigative reporter, finally established contact with him through a secure chat app. We need to meet, she wrote. I can help verify these files properly. People trust me to an extent in the alternative media sphere. We must do it soon. The window is closing. Keane hesitated, knowing any in-person meeting risked being traced. But if they never took that risk, the documents might remain in a swirl of unverified rumour, easy for the mainstream to dismiss. They arranged a rendezvous in a small coastal town's library after hours. The next day, as Keane approached the library, he spotted an unmarked sedan idling in the parking lot. Fear pricked him. Watchers might be tailing. To confirm, he looped around the block. The sedan didn't move, possibly just a random visitor. Summoning courage, he stepped inside. Voss, a tall woman with a worn leather jacket, recognised him from the scattered photos circulated in the media. They sat in a corner among dusty shelves. She offered a handshake, voice calm but urgent. Thomas, I believe you. The official story has always had holes. Let's finalise the proof so we can break it wide open. Keane exhaled relief, sliding a small USB drive across the table. This is a more complete set than what was posted. Contains direct memos about the stand-down orders, the deals with defence contractors, the flight path manipulations, also internal emails referencing the hijackers as assets gone rogue. He paused, tears flickering in his eyes. They used the tragedy for indefinite war, Sarah. They let it happen, or worse, engineered it. Sarah's breath caught. She skimmed a few files on her laptop, eyes widening at references to bank accounts, coded references to Operation Silence. She nodded. This is explosive, but we need a big platform, enough to force coverage. If we just post it on my blog, they'll discredit or block it. We'll get shut down. She explained a plan. Find a mainstream journalist with a rebellious streak, or do a well-publicised live event that too many watchers can't black out entirely. Suddenly, a muffled scuffle at the library entrance startled them. A figure in dark clothes peered in, Keane tensed. Sarah pressed the laptop closed. They ducked behind shelves as footsteps approached, but the library's old caretaker bumbled out, greeting them obliviously. The suspicious figure, glimpsed through the glass, retreated. Possibly a false alarm, possibly a watcher verifying the location. They parted ways quickly, agreeing to meet again in 48 hours near a major city, planning an infiltration of a local news station that might still allow an unfiltered broadcast. Danger soared. If watchers caught wind of their plan, they'd likely come down with lethal force. That evening, Keane received a frantic text from a friend who had once helped him interpret old FA logs. "One of our guys is dead. A boat accident. They're picking us off." The message cut short. Keane shuddered. The watchers had begun eliminating secondary sources who could confirm the leak's authenticity. He realised the ephemeral window for truth was closing. On the streets, protests flared up as rumours swirled of official foreknowledge. Some saw it as disrespectful to the memory of the victims. Others believed the truth must come out no matter how painful. The government, for its part, ramped up a rhetorical war on misinformation. Director Shaw delivered a short, ominous address, vowing that domestic agitators spreading baseless conspiracies will be brought to justice. Among the swirling chaos, Sarah discovered partial references in the documents to a deeper archive. The Saturn Files, an intelligence ledger tracking post-attack financial flows from official budgets to clandestine owners. If they found that ledger's location, they could show the money trail behind the war expansions. That might be the final nail in the coffin of the official story. They needed it, but time was short. Thus the manhunt overshadowed all. Helicopters roamed certain highways, random car searches increased, and the populace grew uneasy, sensing the government's fear that the leak might be real. Keane ducked from motel to motel, adopting new disguises. Soon, though, his luck would run out, or he'd have to risk a direct showdown, trusting the thunder of public outrage to keep him alive. Little did he realise, the watchers were about to tighten the net, deploying a Black Ops team to ensure the leak never reached unstoppable momentum. If Keane couldn't outmaneuver them long enough to break the final evidence, the official illusions would remain intact. If he did, though, the entire structure of post-attack governance might collapse. The next moves would determine everything. The following week saw Thomas Keane evading watchers by day and collaborating with Sarah Voss by night, each meeting more urgent than the last. They discovered references to the Saturn Files scattered in older CIA memos. Allegedly, it was an encrypted database that meticulously traced the money funneling to defence contractors, oil conglomerates and political campaigns in the immediate weeks after the catastrophic event. If authentic, it would confirm the real motive behind the orchestrated false flag: indefinite war and profiteering. At a safe house borrowed from an old contact of Sarah's, they pored over these hints by lamplight. Among the digital shards was a location clue: a retired NSA facility on the outskirts of a southwestern desert, defunct but rumoured to store old backups. "We find that offline archive," Sarah said. "We can copy the Saturn Files in raw form. That's the smoking gun." Keane nodded, though dread of infiltration weighed on him. Between them, they had minimal resources: a battered car, a few $1,000s in cash, and a handful of laptops. The Watchers, on the other hand, had near limitless means: drones, infiltration teams, access to every camera feed in the nation. But the Watchers didn't fully expect them to attempt a break-in at a presumably abandoned facility, so maybe the element of surprise worked in their favour. Director Eldridge Shaw ramped up the clampdown. The official narrative shaped the public mind. A rogue ex-FBI analyst has unleashed foreign-forged documents aimed at undermining national security. Many believed it, but a growing minority saw government overreach, especially after multiple suspicious accidents claimed the lives of other potential whistleblowers. People asked, if it's so false, why chase and kill so aggressively? In one instance, a known data archivist was found shot in his home, with the press labelling it a botched robbery, ignoring the data archivist's link to the leaked material. On social media, had black dust soared. Some city squares erupted in protest, carrying signs that read "We deserve the truth" or "Stop killing our whistleblowers." The Watchers responded by intensifying arrests, calling them rioters. Keane tried to remain focused. He realised that if the Saturn files were real, it might show direct bank transfers from major corporate boards into the pockets of certain officials, all tied to legislation passing huge war budgets after the false flag. That would upend the entire post-attack establishment. "No wonder they're stopping at nothing," Sarah murmured. Securing fake IDs, they travelled cross-country by back roads. Each motel they used for a single night, paying cash. They dodged major highways, suspecting license plate readers. The Watchers likely guessed their aim was to expose more data, but might not know the exact target. Meanwhile, the tension between them soared. The climate was near police state. Newscasts repeated that the domestic terrorist Thomas Keane must be turned in. Civilians were promised big rewards for tips. Billboards with Keane's face popped up along highways. He wore a baseball cap and used tinted glasses, but each day was a dice roll. A near encounter. On a lonely stretch, a black SUV sped behind them. They recognised the pattern. Sarah swerved onto a side route, forging through a small farmland path. The Watchers gave chase. Shots rang out, blowing a tyre. The car careened into a ditch. They scrambled out, hid among tall corn. The Watchers searched, but eventually gave up, presumably to avoid a big scene. This brush with violent capture left them rattled, but also more resolved. "We're obviously on the right track if they're that desperate," Sarah said, breath shaky. Finally, after days, they reached the deserted perimeter of the old NSA outpost. It was ringed by a crumbling fence, a few rusted signposts. By the look of the cracked asphalt and weed-choked yard, it had been abandoned for over a decade. Perfect place to bury secrets. Under twilight, they found a corner of the fence cut open by looters. They slipped inside quietly. The main building rose in silhouette, windows boarded up. A stray coyote howled in the distance, wind carrying a faint metallic whistling from open vents. Inside, dust-coated floors. Old cubicles sat in disarray. They used flashlights to navigate. Eventually they located a sub-basement with battered computer racks. A few beeped faintly with emergency power. "There's power? That's suspicious," Keane muttered. Indeed, it suggested the Watchers might still be pulling some data from here. They approached a locked door labelled Server Vault Archive 6. With Sarah's phone, they scanned a partial code from the documents, generating a bypass sequence that might override older system locks. After multiple tries, a green light flickered. The vault door clunked open. Inside the vault, rows of drives and reels lined metal shelves. Dusty but humming with minimal climate control. They sifted through labels: Operation Cast Peak, Post-K-War Roster, Saturn. That was it. A battered cluster of servers with the word Saturn FSV. They carefully powered one terminal, hooking it to a laptop. Sarah typed a root command. The screen glowed. Restricted. Saturn 1, 2, 3. Enter pass. They tried typical keywords from the docs. On the third attempt, a beep. Access. They were in, files scrolled, each referencing massive funding authorizations, building demolitions, insider trading, logs dated within days of the big attack. The scope was monstrous. It implicated high-level bureaucrats, big banks, and even a few journalists. They orchestrated the tragedy to galvanize fear, pass endless war budgets, feed the arms economy, Sarah whispered, stunned. All hidden under national security drapery. Some lines suggested hijackers were known assets used as a controlled ignition. The betrayal was staggering. In that hush, footsteps upstairs. The Watchers had arrived, no doubt detecting the power usage. "We must copy this now," Keane said, launching a data transfer to multiple external drives. Meanwhile, Sarah prepared to kill lights and hide, but the Watchers rushed down, flashlights slicing through gloom. Gunfire echoed. Bullets pinged off server racks. Sarah huddled behind a console, returning fire with a small pistol she carried. Keane initiated an upload, hooking the server to a secure satellite link via a portable router. The Watchers advanced. He typed frantically. the progress bar inching along, transmission at 10%. Then Director Shaw himself stepped in. "Stop!" he roared, voice reverberating in the metal corridor. "Keen, you have no idea what you're unleashing. The stability of entire alliances depends on burying that day's complexities." Shots resumed. Sarah took a graze to her shoulder, but kept the watchers pinned. The bar reached 50%. Shaw barked an order to lob a small explosive. They tossed a flashbang. The ear-shattering pop disoriented them. The watchers closed in, tackling Sarah. Another pinned Keen. The laptop screen cracked under a boot. The upload froze at 80%. In the struggle, Keen twisted free, smashing a guard's face with the laptop, which ironically forced the laptop back to life. The watchers tried to pull cables. Meanwhile, a stray bullet hit a server coolant line. Steam hissed. The infiltration team realized this was too risky. The entire place might go up. Shaw advanced on Keen, gun raised. "You can die here with your illusions, or you can vanish quietly. The truth will never see daylight." Suddenly an explosion from the coolant line triggered a chain reaction in the old power system. Fire licked the corners, sending watchers scrambling. Sarah crawled to safety. Keen, battered, saw the upload bar at 98%. He roared in defiance, pressing a final keystroke to confirm. The system beeped success. The watchers realized the data had been sent out, unstoppable now. Furious, one aimed at Keen's chest. A final shot rang out. Darkness overcame him. The watchers yanked the cable, but it was too late. The Saturn files had presumably reached a safe node on the open web. Alarms beeped. The facility's meltdown forced a hurried retreat. In the swirling smoke, Sarah was dragged away by an explosion's concussive wave. The watchers grabbed Shaw, retreating. The entire sub-basement collapsed in flame and dust. For all they knew, Keen perished under the rubble. But the watchers had lost the bigger war. The Saturn files were free. Within hours, a torrent of new evidence, the Saturn files, flooded the internet. Anonymous activists, archivists, and journalists worldwide mirrored the data. Even as official agencies tried to block or discredit it, the story soared across social media, overshadowing government censorship efforts. Original documents codenamed Operation White Door, some Project Switchboard, commissioned for filter some Rorsi, provided stark details. Insider collusion with extremist groups, advanced planning to ensure that attacks triggered, panic and indefinite war mobilization, international reaction. Allies demanded urgent clarifications from Washington. Rival nations called for an emergency UN session. The general public, seeing internal memos where top officials weighed acceptable civilian losses for strategic advantage, reeled in fury. Large-scale protests ignited in multiple capitals. People demanded resignations. The entire intelligence apparatus faced the biggest crisis of legitimacy since the day it was formed. Meanwhile, the White House insisted the documents were tampered forgeries. But the mass of cross-corroboration was overwhelming. Anonymous data scientists validated digital signatures, timestamps, usage logs consistent with 20-year-old records. Even some mid-level intelligence employees, shaken by the revelations, publicly confirmed the authenticity. Back home, in the US, the meltdown was immediate. Rallies erupted outside major government buildings, calling for arrests of those named in the files. Corporate board members from arms manufacturing companies faced lawsuits. The stock market dived, particularly for defense sector stocks. Over time, entire boards resigned, some fleeing the country. Various retired generals disclaiming involvement or giving partial confessions fueled headlines. The public found itself torn between anger, betrayal, and heartbreak, reliving the trauma of that fateful day under a horrifying new lens. Media torn. Some mainstream outlets quickly pivoted, acknowledging the new data as genuine after initial attempts to bury it. High-profile anchors apologized for previously parroting the official story. Others doubled down on patriotic narratives, ironically fueling further distrust. The swirl of disinformation versus actual data soared. but the raw evidence was too extensive to suppress. "You can't close the barn door after the horses fled," a commentator said. "The entire architecture of post-attack policy is under question." Director Eldridge Shaw attempted a grand press conference to reassert authority, but the crowd drowned him in jeers. Calls for congressional hearings soared. In a last-chance effort, Shaw's office declared a national security emergency, urging martial law to keep order. That, ironically, only inflamed dissent. Certain states refused to cooperate. Over the next weeks, the old alignment of power began fracturing. Investigations launched from multiple angles, with newly emboldened lawmakers prosecuting those who orchestrated the post-attack expansions for personal gain. Sarah Voss emerged from the southwestern fiasco battered but alive. She revealed how Watchers had infiltrated that abandoned NSA site, how Keane died a hero finalising the upload. She published a moving column titled "One Man's Last Key Press," describing how, in a swirl of gunfire, Keane completed the Saturn files transmission, ensuring no one could bury it. The piece went viral, shaping the public's view of Keane as a tragic whistleblower who gave everything for the truth. At the local level, families of 9/11 victims demanded new trials. The old official commissions were discredited. People realised entire reams of contradictory evidence had been sealed. Even the original investigators admitted they'd been misled or threatened. The emotional toll soared once more. Many felt as though they'd been lied to for decades about the biggest national tragedy. A wave of introspection overcame the country. How had fear become so profitable, and how did good people allow it? Internationally, alliances that had supported the war on terror felt betrayed. Some withdrew forces from contested regions. Others launched their own parliamentary investigations, suspecting shared complicity. The world order that was shaped after the attack started crumbling, replaced by an uncertain future. Some dared to hope it meant a less militarised approach. Others worried that new extremist groups might exploit the chaos. In the midst of all this, rumours circulated that Thomas Keane might still be alive, sightings in some far-off place. Yet no concrete proof existed. Official statements considered him presumed deceased. If he survived, he might have chosen the anonymity of an unknown identity, having done what he set out to do. 6 months later, a massive Senate hearing convened. Top officials were subpoenaed. The public watched enthralled as ex-generals, ex-CEOs, and ex-administration figures from 20 years prior faced grilling. Some invoked national security, others pled the fifth, while a few confessed partial roles. Indictments followed, though not all ended in convictions. The system was too vast, too intricately rigged. Yet the symbolic effect was undeniable. Never again would the official story be accepted unchallenged. At the same time, Sarah Voss launched an independent media platform broadcasting daily updates on the False Skies Inquiry. People from across the spectrum contributed testimonies, documents, or personal stories of how they'd suspect hush-ups. Freed from blacklists, she soared as a public figure, championing the cause of government accountability. A year after the Saturn Files meltdown, a new memorial was erected near the site of the original 9/11 tragedy. A statue depicting a single figure pressing a key, a reflection of Keane's final act. The inscription read, "They took truth from us in the shadows, he brought it back in the light." Visitors left flowers, some seeking solace that the realm of power had at least partially been unmasked. Epilogue. In a quiet coastal town, a fisherman swore he recognised a man from a circulated photo. Older, hair bleached by salt and sun, eyes weighed with sadness. The man told him he used to work for the government, but no more. He spoke of illusions and the cost of unveiling them. Then he vanished at sunrise, leaving only a single battered flash drive behind. If it was Thomas Keane, he apparently chose a wandering fate, letting the world handle the legacy of his bombshell leak. Public trust in large institutions remained shaken. Some remained furious, others hopeful that a new transparency might arise. In the corners of the internet, conspiracy watchers debate if the watchers still exist, planning new false flags. But for now, the greatest deception in modern times has been laid bare. The name Black Dust stands as a testament to the unstoppable power of truth once it's unleashed. In the hush that follows the final note, they used fear to shape the world, but one day fear lost. The truth soared free, and the illusions that once cloaked the skies were shattered in a single day. Some say it's based on classified information that was never meant to reach public ears. Tonight we explore the darkest corners of government experimentation and the thin membrane between dimensions. Daniel Cross bolted upright in his bed, sweat-drenched sheets twisted around his legs like restraints. The dream had returned, more vivid this time. Underground tunnels bathed in pulsing blue light, the cold metal chair, the leather straps on his wrists, and the voices, always the voices, echoing through concrete chambers. Subject 17 demonstrates exceptional receptivity, increased neural amplitude by 30%. His bedroom television flickered with static, though he was certain he'd turned it off before going to sleep. From within the dancing grey pixels came a familiar hum, a sequence of tones just below normal hearing threshold. Something about it pulled at the corners of his mind, like fingers trying to pry open a locked door. Daniel stumbled out of bed and approached the screen, mesmerised. Within the chaos of white noise, patterns emerged, geometric formations that shouldn't exist in random static. His reflection in the screen looked foreign, almost like another person watching him from behind the glass. "Delta Protocol 17, he whispered, the words rising unbidden from some hidden chamber of memory. "Initiate phase bend." The static intensified, the hum growing to an electric whine that made his fillings ache. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the television went black. Daniel stood there, trembling in the dark, wondering why tears were streaming down his face. In the morning, he convinced himself it had been nothing but a particularly vivid nightmare. But as he brushed his teeth, he noticed something unsettling in the bathroom mirror. A small red mark behind his ear, perfectly circular, like a healed puncture wound. He had no memory of receiving it. As the days passed, the dreams intensified. Always the same elements. The underground facility, scientists in lab coats, the chair with its cruel restraints, and tests. Endless tests designed to push the boundaries of his mind. In each dream he was younger, perhaps 11 or 12 years old. But the strangest part was the location that kept appearing in the background of these fractured memories. A distinctive radar tower rising against a darkening sky. When not at work coding security algorithms for a defense contractor, Daniel found himself obsessively drawing the tower, trying to place where he might have seen it before. His apartment walls became covered with sketches, the tower from different angles, the curved coastline it overlooked, strange symbols that his hand seemed to produce without conscious direction. His colleague Martin noticed the change in him first. "You look like hell, Dan," he said over lunch one day. "Not sleeping?" Daniel hesitated. "Just some weird dreams." About what? I don't know. Some kind of facility. Tests. A radar tower by the ocean. Martin's plastic fork paused halfway to his mouth. What kind of tower? An FPS-35, Cold War era, massive thing with a distinctive cowling. Daniel blinked, surprised at his own precise knowledge. Martin set down his fork. That's oddly specific for a dream. I know, and there's something else. Daniel lowered his voice. Sometimes when there's static on the TV I hear something, like a signal. What does it say? It doesn't speak. It's more like a beacon, calling me somewhere. Martin studied him for a long moment. You ever heard of Camp Hero? Out in Montauk? The name sent an electric shiver down Daniel's spine. His coffee cup slipped from suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the floor. Jesus, you okay? Martin asked, jumping back from the spreading puddle. I need to go there, Daniel whispered, staring at nothing. Montauk. The drive to Long Island took 4 hours, but to Daniel it felt like returning from an exile that had lasted decades. As he crossed into the township of Montauk, a pressure began building behind his eyes. Not quite pain, but an insistent awareness, like the sensation before a sneeze that never comes. The roads grew narrower, pine forests pressing in on both sides. His GPS lost signal twice, but Daniel found he didn't need it. His hands seemed to know which turns to take, guiding the car along increasingly remote routes until the trees gave way to scrubland, and beyond that, the Atlantic stretched to the horizon. And there it stood, exactly as he'd drawn it 100 times, the massive radar tower of Camp Hero, its distinctive silhouette rising against the pale blue sky. The abandoned Air Force Base sprawled beneath it, a collection of bunker-like buildings and concrete structures designed to withstand Soviet bombs that never fell. According to the weathered sign at the entrance, Camp Hero was now a state park, its military function long obsolete. But something about the perimeter fence looked too new, the security cameras too well maintained for a simple historic site. Daniel parked in the nearly empty lot and approached the visitor centre, a converted military building with peeling green paint. Inside, a bored park ranger glanced up from her crossword puzzle. Closing in an hour, she said without preamble. I was wondering what you could tell me about the history of this place, Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite the hammering of his heart. Standard Cold War radar station, decommissioned in the early 70s. She pushed a pamphlet across the counter. Self-guided tour maps there. Stick to the marked trails. What about the underground sections? The ranger's crossword pencil stopped mid-letter. Her eyes flicked up to study him more carefully. There aren't any underground sections open to the public, but they exist. Look, mister, this is just an old radar station, if you're one of those conspiracy nuts. I've been here before, Daniel interrupted, surprising himself. When I was a child, not possible. This place was sealed military property until 92. Daniel leaned forward. What about the Montauk project? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The ranger's face hardened as she set down her pencil and reached for the phone. Park's closing early today. You need to leave. I just have a few questions. Now, she said, her finger hovering over the keypad. Or I call security. Daniel retreated to his car, the pamphlet clutched in his hand. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he noticed a black SUV with government plates turning in. The man in the passenger seat photographed his license plate as they passed. Instead of leaving, Daniel drove to the public beach adjacent to the former base. From there, he followed a trail that hugged the dramatic bluffs overlooking the Atlantic. The radar tower remained visible above the tree line, seeming to watch him as he walked. When he reached a chain-link fence marking the base's boundary, Daniel felt a strange duality, his conscious mind seeing it for the first time, while something deeper recognized every rust spot and bent link. He knew, without understanding how, that 20 yards to the left, the fence had been repaired where someone had once cut through it. Sure enough, when he checked, there was a section of newer fencing exactly where he'd expected. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Daniel found a secluded spot where the bluff had partially collapsed, creating a natural path down to a narrow strip of beach. The base's concrete seawall extended here, covered in graffiti and eroded by decades of salt spray. He ran his hand along the rough surface until his fingers caught on something, a small recess containing what appeared to be a rusted electrical box. Without hesitation, Daniel entered a sequence of numbers, 8-1-3-5. Nothing happened. He tried again with 8315, and then finally 8153. A deep mechanical groan emanated from within the wall. A section of concrete, expertly disguised as part of the seawall, shifted inward by several inches. Daniel pushed, and it swung open on hidden hinges to reveal a dark passage leading into the earth. The smell that wafted out was a complex mixture of mildew, ozone, and something chemical that triggered an intense wave of déjà vu. Daniel switched on his phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The passage sloped downward, concrete walls giving way to rough-hewn stone that glistened with moisture. Daniel moved cautiously, guided more by buried memory than by sight. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger space, what appeared to be an abandoned maintenance room filled with rusted equipment and collapsed shelving. But Daniel knew this wasn't its original purpose. He directed his light toward the far wall, where a heavy metal door hung partially ajar. Beyond it lay darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow his flashlight beam. As he approached the threshold, a wave of dizziness overcame him. Fractured images flashed through his mind. Children in hospital gowns, scientists with clipboards, a massive chair surrounded by electronic equipment, and always, the tests. Focus on the light, Daniel. Tell us what you see through the gateway. His phone slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor as Daniel collapsed. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was a symbol scratched into the metal door, a triangle intersecting with a perfect circle. When he awoke, Daniel was lying on the beach, waves lapping at his feet. The sun had set, and stars glittered in the darkening sky. His clothes were soaked with seawater, though he had no memory of entering the ocean. His phone was gone. And most disturbing of all, the entrance in the seawall had vanished, not just closed, but seemingly never there at all. Daniel stumbled to his feet, disoriented. His watch showed it was just past 9 p.m, but the date displayed was wrong. According to his watch, he had lost nearly 3 days. The drive back to his apartment in Connecticut was a blur, a dreamlike passage through darkness punctuated by the hypnotic sweep of headlights. Daniel's mind churned with fragments of memory that couldn't possibly be his, yet felt more authentic than his recollections of college or his first job. He remembered the chair, the Montauk chair they'd called it, a monstrous assemblage of technology salvaged from alien craft and enhanced with Tesla-inspired circuitry. He remembered the sensation when they activated it with him strapped inside, like his consciousness was being pulled through the top of his skull and stretched across dimensions. And he remembered what they made him do with it. Back in his apartment, Daniel paced until dawn, scribbling everything he could recall into a notebook. Names surfaced: Doctor, Marcus Bennett, the project lead with cold blue eyes, Cameron Hayes, the military liaison who always smelled of cigarettes and cheap cologne, and Preston Nichols, the reluctant technician who sometimes snuck the children candy bars when the others weren't looking. Preston Nichols. The name felt important. When morning came, Daniel called in sick to work and drove to the nearest public library. The librarian gave him an odd look when he asked if they had anything on the Montauk project, but directed him to their small collection of conspiracy literature. There, sandwiched between books on Roswell and MK Ultra, was a worn paperback. The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time by Preston B. Nichols and Peter Moon. Daniel's hands trembled as he flipped through pages describing exactly what he'd been remembering. The secret installation at Camp Hero, the psychic experiments, the Montauk chair, even the alleged success in manipulating the fabric of time and space. According to Nichols, the Montauk project was the continuation of the Philadelphia experiment, another rumoured government program that supposedly made a naval destroyer, the USS Eldridge, temporarily invisible and teleported it from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia in 1943. The book claimed the Montauk project had been shuttered after an incident in 1983 when a monstrous manifestation, dubbed the Beast, had been psychically pulled through a dimensional gateway. The creature had wreaked havoc before the power was cut and the project abandoned. But Daniel knew this wasn't entirely true. The project hadn't ended. It had evolved. The techniques refined at Montauk had been incorporated into other programs, dispersed across multiple sites to ensure no single failure could expose the entire operation. Back at his apartment, Daniel found himself standing before his closet, staring at a locked metal box on the top shelf. He had no memory of putting it there, yet he knew exactly what it contained. The key was taped underneath his dresser, precisely where some part of him expected it to be. Inside the box was a US Bank safety deposit key. The following morning, Daniel presented himself at First National Bank in downtown Hartford. He provided the key along with his ID, and the manager escorted him to the vault. When they were alone with the metal drawer extracted from the wall, Daniel opened it with a sense of inevitability. Inside lay a manila envelope, sealed with red security tape bearing federal classifications he shouldn't have had access to. He broke the seal and emptied the contents onto the small table. Photographs spilled out, black and white images of children in a sterile facility. In several, Daniel recognised his younger self, perhaps 10 years old, wired to various machines. In one particularly disturbing image, he sat in a massive chair surrounded by Tesla coils and computer banks, his small form almost swallowed by the ominous apparatus. There were documents too, partial research notes, diagrams of the Montauk chair annotated with equations that made his eyes hurt to look at, and a map of Camp Hero with underground sections marked in red. At the bottom of the pile lay a compact disc in a paper sleeve, unmarked except for a date. August 12th, 1983, the day of the alleged Beast incident. Most chilling of all was a typed list of names under the heading Project Subjects Delta Group. His own name appeared with a designation that turned his blood cold. Subject 17, Primary Gate Opener. That night, with shaking hands, Daniel loaded the disc into his laptop. After whirring for several seconds, the screen displayed a single video file. The footage was grainy, security camera quality. It showed a concrete room dominated by the chair he'd been drawing obsessively. A boy, himself, was strapped into it, electrodes attached to his temples. Men in lab coats monitored equipment while military personnel stood guard at the doors. A voice off camera counted down, initiating Delta Protocol in 3, 2, 1. The lights in the facility dimmed as power surged to the chair. Young Daniel's body went rigid, his back arching impossibly as his eyes rolled back. Equipment sparked and smoked. Several technicians backed away nervously. Then, at the centre of the room, the air itself seemed to tear open. A writhing black void that pulsed like a living thing. From within that impossible darkness, something began to emerge. The camera feed distorted violently, static washing across the screen. When the image stabilised, chaos had erupted. People were screaming, running. Blood spattered one of the walls. And at the edge of the frame, partially obscured, was a glimpse of something that couldn't exist in our reality. A mass of shifting geometries and impossible angles that hurt to look at. The final clear image before the video cut to static. Young Daniel staring directly into the camera. Blood streaming from his nose and ears. Mouth moving to form words that seemed addressed to his future self. You have to shut it down before it opens again. Daniel ejected the disc with numb fingers, his mind reeling. Not just from what he'd seen, but from what was happening inside his head. Memories crystallizing, filling in gaps he hadn't known existed. He remembered now. All of it. The next day he called the only person who might understand. The number was etched in his memory, though he couldn't recall ever learning it. "Hello?" The voice that answered was aged, cautious. "Is this Preston Nichols?" A long pause. "Who's asking?" "My name is Daniel Cross. I was subject 17 at Montauk." The silence that followed lasted so long that Daniel thought the connection had been lost. Finally the old man spoke, his voice a haunted whisper. "God help you, boy. They're still watching. I need answers. Not over the phone. They're always listening." Another pause. "The lighthouse. Tomorrow. Noon." The line went dead. Daniel arrived at the Montauk Point Lighthouse an hour early. Parking his rental car, he'd abandoned his own vehicle, suddenly paranoid about tracking devices, in the tourist lot. The historic lighthouse stood tall against a sky heavy with approaching storm clouds, its red and white stripes a cheerful contrast to the grim purpose of his visit. He spotted Nichols immediately, a heavy-set older man in a worn fisherman's jacket sitting alone on a bench overlooking the Atlantic. As Daniel approached, Nichols didn't turn but spoke as if continuing a conversation already in progress. "They told us we were serving our country," he said, eyes fixed on the churning waves below. "Advancing human potential, opening frontiers. What a load of horse shit." Daniel sat beside him. "You were there. You helped them. And I've spent 40 years trying to make up for it." Nichols finally turned to look at him, his weathered face a map of regret. "Jesus. You grew up. Last time I saw you, you were just a skinny kid with too much power in your head. What did they do to me?" Nichols sighed, reaching into his pocket for a pack of cigarettes. His hands trembled slightly as he lit one. "You were special, even among the sensitives. Most of the children could receive impressions, maybe move small objects, but you could create doorways. Doorways to where? That was the question, wasn't it? At first, they were just focused on remote viewing, psychically observing distant locations. Then they realized some of you kids could not just see, but reach. And you, Daniel, you could open gates that others could step through." The old man took a long drag from his cigarette. "They started small, different rooms in the facility, then different points in time. Just minutes at first, then hours, then years. By 82, they had you opening doorways to other places entirely." "The beast," Daniel said quietly. Nichols' face went ashen. "You remember?" "I found a recording." "Then you know what happened. What came through wasn't from another place on Earth, not even from another time. It was from somewhere else, somewhere that operates under different physical laws." Nichols stubbed out his cigarette with more force than necessary. "We lost 16 people that day before they cut the power. And the thing, it didn't die. It just folded back into dimensions we can't perceive." Daniel's head throbbed with half-formed memories. "They shut it down after that." "Officially, yes. The Montauk project was terminated, the facility sealed. But you know better, don't you?" Nichols fixed him with a penetrating stare. "They just went deeper underground, compartmentalized. The work continued." "But I don't remember anything after that day. I have a whole life. School, college, my job. Artificial memories, very sophisticated. The best MK Ultra techniques combined with targeted chemical therapy. They built you a new identity, brick by brick." Nichols glanced around nervously. "The question is, why are you remembering now?" "The programming doesn't just break down on its own." Before Daniel could respond, his vision split, like a double exposure photograph. Overlaid on the present scene was another image. The same lighthouse, but under clear blue skies, with Nichols wearing different clothes. "Happening again," Nichols was saying, his voice echoing strangely as the two realities flickered and merged. The temporal distortions are getting worse. Daniel gripped the bench, nauseated by the visual discord. What's happening to me? Time is bleeding through. Your connection to the Montauk chair never fully severed. It just went dormant. Nichols leaned closer, his face shifting subtly between older and younger versions of himself. Listen carefully. There's an access point they never sealed. Bunker 14 near the old power station. The equipment is still there. You need to... The world around them rippled like disturbed water. A crushing pressure built inside Daniel's skull as reality itself seemed to stutter. When it stabilized, Nichols was gone. In his place sat a teenage boy with a familiar face. Nichols, 50 years younger, wearing a Camp Hero security badge. Find the failsafe before it's too late, the boy continued in Nichols' elderly voice, seemingly unaware of his transformed state. They're trying to recreate the conditions from 83, but they don't understand the danger. The membrane between worlds is thinner now, weakened by the original experiments. The young Nichols flickered and was replaced by the old man again. He clutched Daniel's arm with surprising strength. Go back to Camp Hero, find Bunker 14, destroy the chair before they can use it again. Another wave of temporal distortion washed over them. When it passed, Daniel was alone on the bench. A family of tourists walked by, giving him curious looks as he sat there, pale and shaking. That night, Daniel returned to Camp Hero under cover of darkness. The perimeter fence posed little challenge. He remembered where the security systems had blind spots, knowledge surfacing from decades past. The ranger station was dark and empty. He made his way through the abandoned base, guided by memories that grew stronger with each step. The power station stood silent, its massive turbines long still. Behind it, half hidden by encroaching vegetation, was a small concrete structure with a faded 14 stenciled on its rusted door. The lock had been broken recently. Inside, a metal staircase descended into darkness. Daniel followed it down, the beam of his flashlight illuminating walls that transitioned from concrete to natural bedrock. The air grew colder, charged with an electrical scent that made the hairs on his arms stand up. At the bottom, a long corridor stretched before him. As he walked, temporal distortions intensified. In flashes he saw the corridor as it had been, brightly lit, staffed by busy technicians and armed guards. He heard snippets of conversation from 40 years ago, saw ghostly figures pass through him as past and present overlapped. The corridor ended at a massive vault door standing partially open. Beyond it lay the heart of the Montauk project, a cavernous chamber housing equipment that should have been removed decades ago. And at its centre stood the chair. Even inactive, it radiated a sense of wrongness, a technology that should not exist, built from principles science had yet to discover. Surrounding it were banks of computers and equipment in various states of repair. Some appeared anciently obsolete, others looked surprisingly modern. Most disturbing of all were the signs of recent activity. Fresh cables ran to newly installed equipment. Toolboxes lay open on workbenches, and a whiteboard was covered with complex equations and a countdown schedule. According to the board, whatever they were planning would happen tomorrow night. As Daniel approached the chair, his consciousness began to splinter. He was simultaneously his present self and his child self, experiencing both timelines at once. In one reality, he stood before the dormant machine as an adult. In the other, he was strapped into it as technicians calibrated its settings. "Good morning, Daniel," said a voice from both past and present. "We've been waiting for you to return." Daniel turned to find Dr. Bennett stepping from the shadows, older now, his hair silver instead of brown, but with the same cold blue eyes. "You," Daniel whispered, "you're still running this. Did you think we'd abandon the most important scientific breakthrough in human history?" Bennett circled him slowly. "Especially after what you showed us was possible. You need to shut this down. You don't understand what you're doing. On the contrary, we understand far better now." Bennett gestured to the upgraded equipment. We've spent 40 years refining the technology, studying the data from the original experiments. The incident in '83 was a momentary setback. 16 people died. Progress requires sacrifice. Bennett's voice hardened. And now you've returned, exactly as our models predicted. The prodigal son drawn back at precisely the right moment. Daniel backed away, moving toward the chair. I came to destroy it. You came because you're still connected to it, because on a quantum level, you've never left that chair. Bennett nodded to someone behind Daniel. Your memories, your independent life, they were never real. Just a holding pattern while your mind matured into what we needed. Too late, Daniel sensed movement behind him. A sharp pain blossomed in his neck as a hypodermic needle sank into his flesh. The room tilted sideways as the sedative took hold. Welcome home, Subject 17, Bennett said as darkness closed in. Tomorrow, you'll help us open the ultimate doorway. Daniel awoke strapped to the chair, electrodes attached to his temples and chest. The bunker hummed with power, banks of equipment manned by technicians in white lab coats. Armed guards stood at attention along the walls. His mind felt clearer than it had in days. The chemical fog of suppressed memories finally lifted. He remembered everything now. His childhood, the tests, the growing fear among the scientists as they realized what they'd discovered, and most of all the true nature of what had come through the gate in 1983. Dr. Bennett approached, clipboard in hand. Consciousness has returned. Excellent. We have limited time before the window aligns. You can't do this, Daniel said, straining against his restraints. You saw what happened last time. A miscalculation. The entity was unstable in our dimensional framework. Bennett checked readings on a nearby monitor. This time we're better prepared. The integration will be controlled. Integration? Cold horror spread through Daniel's chest. You're not just opening a doorway. You want to bring something through permanently? Bennett's smile didn't reach his eyes. Not something, Daniel. Someone. Or perhaps, more accurately, someone's. He gestured toward a large display screen where images flashed in a rapid sequence. Advanced technology, biological enhancements, weapons beyond current human capability. Our visitors have so much to offer. Knowledge, power, evolutionary advancement. Bennett adjusted a dial, increasing power to the chair. All they ask in return is a suitable environment, hosts who can withstand the integration process. They're not visitors, Daniel said, the truth crystallizing in his mind. They're invaders, and you're giving them the door code. Bennett ignored him, addressing the technicians. Begin the initialization sequence. Power to 70%. The chair hummed to life, vibrating subtly beneath Daniel. Familiar sensations flooded his consciousness. The stretching feeling, as if his mind were being pulled from his body and extended across unseen dimensions. On monitors around the room, waveforms pulsed and danced. A technician called out readings. Quantum tunneling effect established. Temporal aperture forming. Daniel closed his eyes, focusing inward. They thought they were in control, using him as a tool, but they'd forgotten something crucial, something even he had only just remembered. He wasn't just a key to open the door, he was the doorway itself. In 1983, when the beast had emerged, young Daniel had done something desperate in the final moments. He'd imprinted a failsafe into the quantum structure of the chair, a back door that only he could access. As the power built around him, Daniel reached into that hidden channel, his consciousness expanding beyond the confines of normal space-time. He could feel them waiting on the other side, vast intelligences, ancient and patient, pressing against the membrane between worlds like fingers testing a soap bubble's strength. And they were hungry. Aperture at 60%, called a technician. Dimensional breach imminent. Bennett leaned over Daniel, voice low and eager. Can you feel them? They've waited so long to meet us properly. Yes, Daniel whispered, his eyes still closed. I can feel them, but they're not what you think. Power surge, shouted a technician. Systems drawing more than input capacity, Bennett whirled. That's impossible. Check the... It's me, Daniel said, his voice oddly calm as blood began to trickle from his nose. I'm the power source now. I always was. Around the room, equipment sparked and smoked. Lights flickered as power drained from all systems toward the chair. The metal beneath Daniel grew hot enough to scorch his skin, but he barely noticed the pain. At the centre of the room, air began to twist and distort, reality folding like origami into impossible geometries. Through the forming aperture came glimpses of a realm beyond human comprehension, vast architectures that defied Euclidean space, entities composed of light and thought rather than matter. Yes! Bennett exulted, oblivious to the danger. It's working! A technician grabbed his arm. Sir, the subject's brainwave patterns are altering the protocol. He's changing the coordinates. Override him. Cut direct neural input. We can't. He's bypassed the safeguards. Daniel opened his eyes, now glowing with an inner light that cast no shadows. When he spoke, his voice reverberated with harmonics that made glass surfaces throughout the bunker vibrate. I'm not opening a door for them to come here, he said. I'm creating a vacuum, a one-way passage. The aperture grew, swirling darkness shot through with impossible colours. Air rushed toward it in a howling vortex. Loose objects began sliding across the floor. What are you doing? Bennett screamed over the maelstrom. What I should have done 40 years ago! Daniel's restraint snapped as his body lifted slightly from the chair, suspended by forces beyond conventional physics. I'm collapsing the bridge between worlds, permanently. The suction intensified. A guard lost his footing and slid screaming into the vortex, his body stretching bizarrely before vanishing. Others clutched desperately at bolted-down equipment. You'll destroy everything! Bennett clawed his way toward a control panel. Only the infection, Daniel replied. The chair, the technology, the knowledge, everything that came through, everything that doesn't belong in our reality. With a sound like the universe tearing, the aperture expanded to engulf the chair itself. Metal warped and stretched as it was pulled into the void. Equipment imploded, circuitry unravelling at the atomic level as fundamental forces rewrote themselves around the collapsing gateway. Bennett made a final desperate lunge toward Daniel, face contorted with rage. We were so close! As the doctor's fingers brushed his arm, Daniel felt a moment of genuine pity. They were never going to share, Doctor. We weren't potential allies. We were cattle. The floor beneath them buckled as structural supports failed. Chunks of ceiling crashed down as the entire bunker began to collapse inward toward the hungry void. In the final moments before consciousness fled, Daniel saw something massive beginning to emerge from the aperture, not entering our world but being pulled back to its own. The beast of Montauk, returning to its native dimension after 40 years of patient waiting in the spaces between worlds. Its vast form registered in his human perception only as impressions, countless eyes, geometries that hurt to comprehend, and a telepathic voice that bypassed his ears to resonate directly in his mind. You have closed the way. But there are other doors, other keys. As darkness claimed him, Daniel directed one final surge of power into the collapsing gateway, sealing it with his consciousness as the lock. Daniel awoke to the rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors. Sunlight streamed through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across starched white sheets. His body felt leaden, every movement requiring conscious effort. A nurse noticed he was awake and summoned a doctor. A kindly-faced woman who explained he had been found unconscious on the beach near Montauk Point, severely dehydrated and suffering from exposure. He had been in a coma for 6 days. When she asked what had happened to him, Daniel claimed not to remember. 3 days later, he checked himself out against medical advice. His apartment, when he returned to it, had been searched with professional thoroughness, nothing obviously disturbed, but he could feel the intrusion like a psychic fingerprint on every surface. His computer was gone. so were his notebooks filled with memories and sketches. In their place sat a slim manila folder containing a single document, a government position offer with the Department of Energy at a salary triple his current one. The message was clear: forget what happened, take the money, live a comfortable life under watchful eyes. Daniel burned the offer and set to work. Over the next week he purchased equipment from various sources: a high-end laptop paid for in cash, specialised broadcasting gear from hobbyist shops, components that could be assembled into a transmission system powerful enough to reach audiences beyond normal channels. In a cheap motel room paid for under a false name, he connected the final wires and activated the system. The setup was crude but effective, capable of piggybacking on existing broadcast networks and digital platforms, inserting his message into the stream of constant information that flowed through modern society. Daniel positioned himself before the camera and began recording. My name is Daniel Cross. Until recently I was Subject 17 of a classified government program known as the Montauk Project. What I'm about to tell you sounds like fiction. I wish it were. But Montauk wasn't some urban legend. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. It is real. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, at the decommissioned Camp Hero Air Force Base in Montauk, New York, the government conducted experiments in mind control, teleportation, and dimensional manipulation. They used children with psychic abilities. I was one of those children. They discovered that the human mind, properly augmented and focused through what they called the Montauk chair, could do more than just bend spoons or read thoughts. It could tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. Through these experiments, contact was made with entities from beyond our dimension. The scientists thought they were communicating with advanced beings who would share knowledge and technology. They didn't understand what they were really dealing with. These entities, I don't know what to call them except perhaps predators, they wanted access to our world, not to share, not to help, but to colonize, to consume. They found willing collaborators among power-hungry men who didn't understand what they were inviting in. In 1983 there was an incident. Something came through, partially. We called it the Beast. 16 people died, officially. The project was supposedly shut down, but it never truly ended. They just went deeper underground, fragmented the research across multiple black sites. Last week they tried again. They brought me back, their most successful gate opener, to create a permanent doorway between dimensions. But I collapsed the gateway instead, destroying the Montauk chair and sealing the breach. Daniel paused, wiping blood that had begun to trickle from his nose. I don't know how long I have before they find me. The entities can't come through directly anymore, but their influence remains. They've compromised people in positions of power, not through some sci-fi body snatching, but through whispered promises, glimpses of knowledge no human was meant to possess. The technology created at Montauk still exists in fragmented form. The research continues under different code names, different facilities. Watch for signs, unusual military installations, clusters of missing children with unusual abilities, weather anomalies that defy explanation. These are the fingerprints of operations continuing what Montauk began. I'm uploading documentation with this broadcast, images, partial research notes, coordinates of suspected continuation sites. I've hidden additional evidence in secure locations that will be released automatically if anything happens to me. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, fundamentally wrong in a way you can't explain, pay attention to that feeling. The membrane between worlds has been weakened. Sometimes things slip through, even without a gate as large as the one they tried to create. They made us forget, but memory is a dangerous thing. Daniel leaned closer to the camera, his eyes haunted but determined, especially when it remembers the future. The recording ended there. Daniel uploaded it along with scanned copies of the documents he'd recovered. He used specialized distribution protocols to seed the files across countless servers worldwide. Too dispersed to be completely erased, too widespread to be dismissed as the ravings of a single disturbed individual. As the final upload completed, his laptop screen flickered with static. From within the electronic noise, patterns emerged. The same signal that had called to him from his television weeks ago. But this time Daniel recognised it for what it was. A beacon. Not from them, but from others like him. Children of Montauk, awakening to their suppressed memories, reaching out across the digital void. He wasn't alone. Daniel closed the laptop and packed his few remaining possessions. Through the thin motel curtains, he could see 2 black SUVs pulling into the parking lot. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with the coordinated precision of government operatives. They were too late. The truth was out now, propagating through networks they couldn't fully control. His testimony would reach millions before they could contain it, seeds of awareness planted in receptive minds. Daniel sat calmly on the edge of the bed, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door. He wasn't afraid anymore. He understood now that what had happened at Montauk had changed him permanently. The powers they had awakened in him hadn't disappeared. They had merely gone dormant, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. As the heavy footsteps approached his door, Daniel closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, searching for the quantum threads that connected all points in space-time. There were other places he could go, other times. After all, he had been their best gate opener. The door burst open. 2 agents rushed in, weapons drawn. They found an empty room, the window still closed and locked from the inside, the bathroom vacant. On the bed lay Daniel's phone, screen displaying a text message addressed to Dr. Bennett. There are other doors, other keys, and now I have them all. 3 days later, on computer screens across the world, a single symbol appeared momentarily before vanishing, a triangle intersecting with a perfect circle. The Montauk project was never officially acknowledged. Those who spoke too publicly about it suffered accidents or disappeared. The broadcast was discredited, its evidence dismissed as elaborate hoaxes. But something had changed. People began to notice things they'd overlooked before. Children reported strange dreams of underground facilities and tests. Researchers documented unexplained temporal anomalies near certain government installations, and occasionally, in the white noise between radio stations or in the static of untuned televisions, listeners reported hearing a voice, just on the edge of comprehension, repeating the same warning. They made us forget, but memory is a dangerous thing, especially when it remembers the future.